Chapter 684. In an instant Rinpoche was sucked toward Tu Hong. Everyone at the side cried out in alarm. However, in the next moment, this exclamation turned into a gasp of cold air. Everyone inhaled in unison. Even Hong Xian, Bai Shihu, Lu Ruoyao and the others gasped. When the two of them were 3 meters away from each other, they suddenly bounced away from each other. It was as if the two of them had punched each other in the air without anyone seeing. Rinpoche was suddenly smashed to the ground, while Tu Hong bounced away diagonally into the air. Then the two of them suddenly flew toward each other, got closer and closer, and then bounced away from each other again. It was as if the two of them were fighting in the air that no one could see. The sudden changes made everyone a little stunned. They didn't know whether to breathe or not, and they couldn't make a sound with their mouths open. Bang! This time Rinpoche couldn't control his body again and fell to the ground. He immediately rolled backward to stabilize himself and looked up at Tu Hong, who was falling from the sky. At this time Tu Hong was also shocked. He knew better than anyone else that the two of them didn't make contact at all, and it was as if they were suddenly bounced away by the air. In other words, it was this thing on his waist that took him away. What did you do to this thing? Tu Hong landed on the ground and asked with a gloomy expression. I didn't do anything. I just used some of the characteristics of the material. Of course you wouldn't understand even if I told you. Even if you understood, I wasn't going to tell you. Rinpoche chuckled. You are a Cardinal Heaven expert, so I naturally have to use some small tools to compete with you. Those small things that you look down on the most. Do you still want to try them? Rinpoche asked. The difference between a Cardinal Heaven expert and an ordinary person isn't just in strength and speed, but also in reaction speed. No matter what you did, you need to be able to react in time before you can use those small tricks. Did you not expect me to do that when I suddenly jumped on top of your head? That's why you almost couldn't react in time? That's why I almost caught you just now. As long as I'm faster to the point where you can't react, I will definitely be able to catch you, Tu Hong said seriously and then grinned. You will definitely lose. Rinpoche spread his hands. What else could he say? Continue to work hard. He continued to pose and beckoned, come. Tu Hong stood there, his aura rising and his muscles began to bulge. His clothes were tightly wrapped around his body. With a ripping sound, Tu Hong's clothes exploded, leaving only a pair of shorts on his body. At the same time, green patterns began to appear on his body. Like living creatures, they twisted and wriggled on his body. At this time, he's igniting his blood essence? The surrounding onlookers were shocked. Is he crazy? Even in battle, burning one's blood essence was only done when facing a powerful enemy. Furthermore, the opponent in this duel was the Empress's husband, an ordinary person. Yet he actually burned his blood essence? Is that guy really that powerful? To be able to force Lord Tu to this extent? Lu Ruoyao was shocked. Sir Tu cannot lose. Hong Xian sighed. If Tu Hong were to lose again, the Tu family would lose all face. Your Majesty, I'll stop him, Tu Wan said as she stood up from her seat. There's no need. The Empress waved her hand. There's no need to stop him. This is also a part of his strength. Tu Wan took a serious look at the Empress. She looked calm and cold like an iceberg and she couldn't tell what she was thinking. Rinpoche was shocked to see Tu Hong's clothes explode. If the magnet was broken, he would be in trouble. Fortunately, the muscles on his waist weren't like other parts of his body and didn't break the magnet. Bang! Tu Hong disappeared in an instant, leaving behind a 1-meter-wide pit on the ground. Rinpoche also disappeared along with him. He can still react? Tu Hong, who was still in the air, looked at Rinpoche, who was still maintaining the same distance from him, and was shocked. Once again he stomped hard on the ground. It was as if the air had exploded, and his speed increased again. However, Rinpoche didn't slow down at all. I have to be faster. Tu Hong shouted as the blood vessels and veins on his legs twisted around them like flood dragons. The veins on his body became even more concentrated. Still can't catch up? What? Is it because he keeps facing me? If I go behind him, he won't be able to see me. Tu Hong suddenly changed his direction and circled around Rinpoche. During this process, Rinpoche was still retreating in the opposite direction and didn't stop at all. I have to be faster. 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 Everyone saw the two of them constantly changing directions in the air like two gusts of wind. One moment they were heading east and the next moment they were heading west. However, Rinpoche always maintained a certain distance from Tu Hong. Regardless of whether Tu Hong was in front or behind him, Rinpoche seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. No matter where the other party was, he would always move in the opposite direction. His movement posture wasn't flattering, and people didn't even know how he exerted his strength. In other words, he didn't exert any strength at all. There seemed to be a thick air barrier between them. Tu Hong and Rinpoche were on one side, and Tu Hong kept pushing the barrier. No matter which direction he pushed, Rinpoche was always on the other side of the barrier. "I don't believe it, I don't believe it." Tu Hong's eyes were bloodshot and he looked ferocious. "I'm a Cardinal Heaven expert. How can you keep up with my speed?" Tu Hong fiercely jumped toward Rinpoche again. The same suction force came again, but in the next second the two of them were bounced off each other. This time Rinpoche was tumbling in the air. Between them there was a suction force and a repulsion force. Rinpoche felt dizzy spinning in the air, and he had to focus all his attention on the suction force of the magnet. He kept switching between the two belts. Everyone watched as the two of them were sometimes far away and sometimes close together. Sometimes they were pulled in the same direction and sometimes they were bounced off each other. However, Tu Hong couldn't even touch the corner of Rinpoche's clothes. Rinpoche didn't know how long he had been spinning for, but he was suddenly thrown to the ground. He felt dizzy and nauseous and he started vomiting as soon as he jumped up. As he vomited, he looked at the other side from the corner of his eye and saw that someone had appeared between him and Tu Hong. "Xanjia. Sir Tu, it's over. You have lost," Xanjia said calmly. However, her eyes were shining with a strange light. "Impossible, impossible, impossible, impossible." Tu Hong stood there motionless and his eyes were filled with red light. "A loss is a loss. Don't forget your identity." Tu Wan's voice traveled 100 meters into his ears. The familiar voice sobered him up a little and he continued to mutter, "Impossible? Impossible?" Rinpoche retched for a long time, turned off the circuit on his belt, got up and walked toward Tu Hong. "The facts have proven everything." "Impossible. Impossible." Tu Hong continued to mutter. As a Cardinal Heaven expert, Rinpoche couldn't even catch an ordinary person in such an empty area after the time it took for an incense stick to burn. He absolutely couldn't accept this. "Are you so unwilling? Do you want to compete again?" Rinpoche stood up straight, put his hands behind his back and chuckled. Upon hearing this, Tu Hong suddenly looked up at him and said, "Compete? Compete again? Let's not compete again. It's boring. How about this? Put me in a cage next time. As long as you break the cage and catch me, you will win. Don't worry, the cage is made of ordinary iron, and even a child can tear it apart with his bare hands. You can try it on the spot and let everyone see. Then as long as you break the cage and catch me, you will win," Rinpoche suggested. "I'll compete," Tu Hong said with red eyes. Chapter 685. "That thing of yours is quite interesting. How do you do it?" the Empress asked Rinpoche as they chatted after returning to the palace. "It's the attraction and magnetic force of a magnet." Rinpoche smiled and explained the attraction and magnetic force to her before asking, "Your Majesty, would you like to try it?" "Sure." Rinpoche didn't expect the Empress to be so interested. Rinpoche asked someone to bring the strong magnet hoop and 2 electromagnet belts over. He then put the magnetic hoop on the Empress's body. However, the Empress's slender waist could only fit 2 people in the hoop. She still needed to hold it with one hand. Rinpoche put the belt on himself and smirked. In this case, the magnetic force didn't depend on strength but on the weight. He was at least twice as heavy as the Empress. "What are you planning?" The Empress rolled her eyes when she saw the smirk on Rinpoche's face. "Nothing." Rinpoche quickly denied it. He looked around and then went behind the Empress so that she would be bounced back to the door. Then he pressed the button on one of the belts. The Empress instantly felt a force coming from the belt that wanted to send her flying, and her body immediately sank. Whoosh, bang. Rinpoche stretched out his hand and hung on the wall with an embarrassed look on his face. "This doesn't make sense. Your Majesty didn't use any force, so why am I the one who flew out?" I knew you were hiding something." The Empress glanced at him and said faintly. Rinpoche struggled, but the repulsive force completely squeezed him to the wall, and he couldn't move his waist at all. "However, I still have one more move." Rinpoche immediately switched to another belt. The Empress felt that the magnetic ring on her waist wanted to fly in another direction, but her body sank and didn't move at all. With a big smile on his face, Rinpoche pounced toward the Empress in the air. He was sucking her in. Seeing that Rinpoche was getting closer and closer, the Empress raised her right hand and pushed his shoulder. Kacha. Rinpoche spun around and crashed into the Empress. The Empress grabbed his belt with one hand and spun her body on the ground. Her red muslin swayed along with her body. As the two of them spun on the ground, everything in the hall became blurry. Only the two of them looked at each other, and it was as if they were the only ones left in the world. Then the Empress flung Rinpoche out of the bedroom door like a cannonball. The Empress tossed a battery up and down. Sure enough, this was the problem. As soon as this thing was pulled down, the suction force disappeared. After a while, Rinpoche came back with his face covered in dirt. One of his arms was dangling, and he had a tragic look on his face as he said, "Your Majesty, my arm was broken after you pushed me." The Empress sighed. "You are too fragile. Someone get the doctor from the clinic here." Rinpoche sighed and said, "To Her Majesty, there aren't many people who aren't fragile, right?" Fortunately, in the end, the doctor at the clinic took a look at him and found that it was just a dislocation, so he pushed him back. Rinpoche's victory caused quite a stir among the officials of Lan City. Although Rinpoche looked a little disheveled, he was only at the level of a Sifang heaven expert. He was only at the level of a cardinal heaven expert, while Tu Hong was a cardinal heaven expert. Even after the time it took to burn a stick of incense, they still couldn't catch him. Furthermore, most of the time, Rinpoche's speed wasn't inferior at all. This was enough to shock everyone watching at the scene. First, Du Laolu defeated Tu Yu. Then there was the match between Rinpoche and Tu Hong. The results of these two matches had always been a huge shock to the Aboriginal officials. Rinpoche's words after the duel between Du Laolu and Tu Yu were also heard by everyone during this duel. Now, everyone was waiting for the next match in 7 days. While the officials of Lan City were shocked, the students of the academy were greatly encouraged, and their confidence skyrocketed. On the other hand, everyone in Tu Hong's residence was disappointed. No matter what the reason was, Kismet Heaven Tu Yu lost to Four-Way Heaven expert Du Laolu and Cardinal Heaven expert Tu Hong lost to Four-Way Heaven expert Rinpoche. The results of these two matches made everyone in the two residents unable to raise their heads. They were also waiting for the next match. Although the results of this match made them understand that since Rinpoche dared to take the initiative to propose another match, there must be a problem with the seemingly simple content. However, they couldn't figure out what the problem was even after racking their brains. General Xinjia. Rinpoche called out to Xinjia, who was walking in the palace, with a kind smile on his face. "What's the matter?" Xinjia pushed up her glasses. Behind the lenses was a sharp gaze. With these glasses, she could finally see everything in this world clearly. As a result, her attitude toward Rinpoche, who had given her these glasses, was much better. At least it wasn't as cold as before. "Can you help me with an experiment?" Rinpoche tried to make his expression more amiable. Back then, he had used an electric baton and knew that the resistance of ordinary people in Deo to electricity was only slightly better than that of people on Earth. However, he wasn't confident in dealing with a cardinal heaven expert. He had to make the other party lose their strength without endangering their lives. Therefore, he needed a cardinal heaven expert as a test subject. Although there were experts of this level everywhere in the imperial court, in other words, the imperial court was basically filled with such experts, it wasn't easy to find a test subject. Therefore, he set his sights on Xinjia, who was in the palace. "Test." Xinjia was a little puzzled. "What do you mean?" "It's to help me test the power of a piece of equipment and see what effect it has on a cardinal heaven expert," Rinpoche said bluntly. "Are you going to test it?" Xinjia asked directly. "Yes." "That will have to wait until after I see Her Majesty." Xinjia replied straightforwardly. "Thank you very much. I'll treat you to a cake." Rinpoche reached out and took out a piece of cake from nowhere. Rinpoche felt like he was about to become Doraemon. However, Doraemon could take out all kinds of things like see-through glasses, while he could only take out all kinds of desserts. Who asked the people in the palace to only recognize desserts? Desserts were now almost a hard currency in the palace. At the very least, they could be used to deal with the Empress, Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, Lin Xiaola, and the person in front of him. Xinjia didn't refuse. She took the cake from Rinpoche's hand and walked toward the Empress's quarters. Rinpoche returned to Pingle Park to play the slapping game with Tian Tian and Gun Gun. When the two pandas slapped him, Rinpoche dodged them and slapped them with the back of his hand. The two pandas would turn around and sit there in a daze for a long time. After playing for a while, tears started to fall from Tian Tian's and Gun Gun's bean-sized eyes. Rinpoche couldn't play anymore. Fortunately, Xinjia came at this time. Chapter 686. Take a seat first. Rinpoche brought Xinjia to a room in Pingle Park. There was only one chair inside and there were rows of wooden boxes in the corner. It looked like a storeroom. From the two uncovered boxes, one could see that they were filled with stun grenades that they had seen before. While Xanja stood there and sized up the room, Rinpoche moved a few boxes from the side and took out a set of equipment. 5 cylindrical lithium batteries were connected in series and connected to an electric current controller. To calculate the damage caused by the electric current, one needed to calculate the voltage and the current flowing through the human body. However, this electric current controller could display the value of the current flowing through the human body. All right. Rinpoche looked up and saw that Xanja was still standing there. Can you take off the metal armor? The test results won't be accurate if you are wearing metal armor. What do I need to do? Xanja asked. You need to be electrocuted to test the resistance of a cardinal heaven expert to electricity and the effects of it, Rinpoche said. Here? Xanja asked again. Yes. Without another word, Xanja took off her half-body armor, revealing her smooth abdomen and beautiful curves. Rinpoche thought that Xanja would be naked like before and even prepared clothes for her. He didn't expect her to be wearing a sports vest. This thing is quite comfortable to wear. Xanja tugged at the hem of the sports vest and took off her combat skirt. She was still wearing the standard safety pants. Rinpoche felt that Xanja was a little similar to Lin Xiaola. They didn't understand or guard each other much. They were both in the palace, so why did the Empress have such a big reaction? Rinpoche was a little curious. If the Empress didn't guard against this, he would be in for a treat. However, the experiment was more important now. At this moment, Rinpoche looked at this extremely beautiful bespectacled lady who was wearing a sports singlet and safety pants. He didn't feel much about it and directly handed Xanja a metal clamp. The wire at the end of the clamp was connected to the battery through an electric current controller. Test 10 mA first. Rinpoche adjusted the electric current controller as he spoke. The room was still considered dry, and the other party wasn't wearing metal armor. An electric current of 100 mA was needed to cause fatal damage. The aboriginals had a higher resistance, and the Cardinal Heaven experts had a higher resistance. However, Rinpoche wanted to conduct a detailed test from the start. How do you feel? Rinpoche asked. I don't feel anything. Xanja was slightly curious as she watched him fiddle with those things. To her, these things were very fresh and interesting. In the past, she wouldn't have cared, but after going to Earth and seeing so many things that she had never seen before, she began to be curious about Rinpoche's things. Rinpoche nodded and said, ordinary people can sense it at 5 mA. It seems like their resistance is much higher than that of ordinary people. It's 20 mA now. How do you feel? Rinpoche asked after adjusting it. A normal man would have felt his hands numb under this electric current, and it would be difficult for him to release the electrodes. However, Xanja's reaction was, it's a little itchy as if a bug is crawling. How about now? This time, Rinpoche adjusted it to 50 mA, a value that would make it difficult for ordinary people to breathe. Is still a bug crawling and it even bit me. The bespectacled girl looked at the iron clamp in her hand curiously and casually clamped it on her finger. Rinpoche set it to 80 mA. It's a little numb. When he adjusted it to 100 mA, Xanja still felt numb. It wasn't at the level where a normal man would feel numb at 20 mA and be unable to release the electrodes. When Rinpoche gradually increased the electric current to 150 mA, Xanja suddenly let out a soft groan. Or rather, it should be said that she moaned. This moan made Rinpoche's heart skip a beat. After all, he could ignore such a woman sitting in front of him. However, who could ignore her if she let out such a sound? It's a very strange feeling. Xanja was at a loss. When the electric current passed through her body just now, there was an inexplicable feeling in her body. It was like an impulse that made her panic. Rinpoche calmed down and asked, what do you feel? Try again. Xanja looked puzzled. As Rinpoche turned on the electric current, Xanja let out another soft moan. Xanja composed herself and said, it's numb. Rinpoche adjusted it to 250 mA again. This time, it was a soul-stirring moan. Xanja had no idea what it meant for others to hear her make such a sound. Rinpoche was speechless. He looked up at Xanja, who was in front of him, and then looked at the electric current controller in his hand. Rinpoche felt that this experiment couldn't continue. Wait for me. Rinpoche left Xanja in the room and went out to look for something suitable. If she let out such a sound again, he wouldn't be able to continue the experiment. He had the idea of finding a man to experiment on, but after thinking about what would happen if a man made such a sound, Rinpoche felt that it was better to let Xanja go. After a while, Rinpoche returned with 2 wooden sticks that had been cut and handed one to Xinjia. "What are you doing?" "Biting it," Rinpoche replied. "This will make the sound softer." Xinjia looked at him with a dazed expression. "Why don't you tone it down a little?" Rinpoche asked kindly. "It's a very strange feeling." Xinjia frowned. "I will try not to make any sound." However, when the electric current reached 300 milliamperes, Xinjia's body spasmed. It was as if she was having an epileptic seizure, and she let out a high-pitched moan, F***CK. When Rinpoche saw her reaction, a fire started to burn in his stomach. He was so frightened that he switched off the electric shock device and ran out of the room. Xinjia didn't know what was going on, but he knew better than anyone else. He went out and poured a basin of water from head to toe before he felt slightly better. "Damn it, didn't I just want to do an experiment on the effects of electric current on a Cardinal Heaven expert? Do I have to be so scary?" Rinpoche felt that he was too innocent. When Rinpoche calmed down and wanted to return to his room, Xinjia had already dressed up and came out. "The experiment isn't done yet," Rinpoche said. "I still feel that something isn't right. I have to go back and think about it." Xinjia's face was flushed. Although she tried her best to look calm, her eyes were wandering, and her expression was completely different in Rinpoche's eyes. Rinpoche didn't say anything else and took out a piece of cake. If Xinjia went back and figured it out, things would be bad. Although this was unlikely, she wouldn't be able to figure it out without any source of information. However, if she refused to do the experiment, where was he going to find a suitable Cardinal Heaven expert? Chapter 687. The day before the second competition, the Empress suddenly asked, "These 2 days, I feel that there's something wrong with the commander of the Imperial Guards. Do you know what it is?" Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat. "A few days ago, I looked for General Xinjia to conduct an electric shock experiment to test the resistance of a Cardinal Heaven expert to electricity. After all, if we don't understand it clearly and calculate accurately, we can easily lose our lives." "Electric shock?" The Empress looked pensive. "Is it like that person? Ning Kaichen?" Rinpoche didn't expect the Empress to remember him. "Perhaps it's that name." "You know who I'm talking about," the Empress said faintly. "However, what are you going to do if something goes wrong with the commander of the Imperial Guards?" "There won't be any problems. Ning Kaichen was an accident," Rinpoche replied. "If something goes wrong, I will be the commander of the Imperial Guards." "Forget it, I still have to protect you." The Empress waved her hand and glanced at him. Didn't he know how weak he was? The shock of the electric current might have affected General Xinjia a little, but she should be fine after a while, Rinpoche explained. "I hope so." The Empress nodded. "In that case, I will go back to prepare." Seeing that the Empress was fine, Rinpoche got up and left. He only heaved a sigh of relief after walking a long distance out of the bedroom. It was just an experiment, but this was science. Why did he feel so guilty? However, he couldn't bring himself to think about the scene at that time. If another person had appeared there, he wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. This was the first time Rinpoche saw Xinjia's face. It was full of wildness, temptation, and a trace of helplessness. Later on, it was mixed with an expression of enjoyment. It was like a dancing flame that wanted to burn him and everything around him to ashes. When all the experiments were finally completed, Xinjia, who was a Cardinal Heaven expert, was drenched in sweat. It was as if she had just been fished out of the water. The 2 pieces of clothing on her body clung tightly to her body, and her body, which was drenched in sweat, reflected the sunlight that shone through the window. As for Rinpoche, he was also drenched in sweat. To be able to control himself under such circumstances, Rinpoche felt that he was much better than Lu Xiaohui, who was sitting calmly in bed. Fortunately, Rinpoche had obtained the information that he wanted. Under normal circumstances, the upper limit of Xinjia's electricity tolerance was 550 milliamperes, but it reached 800 milliamperes after the initial ignition of her blood essence. Rinpoche estimated that the maximum limit of the blood essence burning should be 1000 milliamperes. When the blood essence was completely ignited, the electric current passing through the body would reach this value, and the entire body would be paralyzed. It would be difficult to breathe, and it would be life-threatening if the duration was prolonged. This duration was more than 10 seconds. However, this number was already terrifying enough. It was important to note that an ordinary person's life would be in danger if the electric current passed through their body exceeded 100 milliamperes. The resistance of a Cardinal Heaven expert was 5 to 10 times stronger. If one was stronger, their resistance would be even higher. As he pondered, the scene in that room appeared in his mind again, as well as the pair of eyes that were at a loss because of the changes in his body. He hurriedly shook his head to get rid of the thoughts in his mind. The look in her eyes made him feel very guilty. Xanja was different from Ning Kaichen. Ning Kaichen could choose his own path and Xanja did not feel guilty. As for Xanja, her expression and gaze at that time were unforgettable, and he felt a little apologetic. Renbachien walked briskly through the palace. Behind him, a woman in armor appeared from a corner. She looked at his back view and walked in another direction. Although it was an experiment and she knew what Renbachien was doing, she always felt that something was wrong after the incident, but she did not know what the problem was. In particular, the feeling of her body at that time made her extremely terrified every time she thought about it. She wanted to forget it but she could not. It was like a nightmare that haunted her. This time Hong Xian and the others are betting again. The odds are 1-1 against Yagüe. Are you guys betting? You won the last time. I'm betting again. Although the odds are lower, I bet 60 taels of silver when the odds were 1-10 last time. If I win again this time, I will win 1,200 taels of silver. Furthermore, I will be able to see the look on their faces when they lose. Just thinking about it makes me happy. Su Ping laughed. You have confidence in Yagüe. Even that coward Du Laolu won. Will Yagüe lose? Besides, I can roughly guess what Yagüe is going to do. One day later, there was still a sea of people outside the city. In addition to the court officials from the previous time, many commoners heard the news and rushed over to watch the match between four-way heaven experts and cardinal heaven experts. This included the people from the Zhang family and the Jing tribe. This time, they appeared at the side of the arena and occupied a small space in the corner. An average-sized iron cage was transported to the center of the arena. The 6 sides of the cage were made of steel bars that were not as thick as a pinky finger. They were made by the Ministry of Works and were not mixed with any additional metals. Anyone who had the strength of a four-way heaven expert could easily tear it apart. Subsequently, someone placed a cushion made of an unknown material and a wooden chair inside. Renbachien and Tu Hong looked at each other and walked into the arena. However, their expressions were very different. Renbachien looked relaxed and carried a box in his hand, while Tu Hong looked grim. After all, he had already lost one match and could not afford to lose a second one no matter what. In addition to the two of them, there was also a 7- or 8-year-old child with a runny nose. His strength was equivalent to that of a four-way heaven expert. For a commoner's child, this was considered pretty good. Renbachien entered the cage through the small door, closed the door and sat on the chair unhurriedly. He placed the box in his hands on the cushion at his feet, pulled out an iron clamp that was connected to a wire, and connected it to the bottom of the metal cage at the side. It's done. You can try it first, just like what I said to you just now, Renbachien said to the child with a smile. Oh. The child went forward and pulled on one of the iron bars. It didn't take much effort for the iron bar to bend. Let's go back and get the reward from that person, Renbachien said with a smile. That child immediately ran back to the crowd with a happy face. These things were made by the Ministry of Works without any tampering. The tampering is on the box at my feet. As long as you can pull the cage apart, you will be able to pull me out and you will win, Renbachien said calmly. Tu Hong naturally knew that the iron cage was made by the Ministry of Works and saw the child easily pull the iron bars apart. Could be said that he could break the iron cage with a slap. However, after experiencing a failure, he couldn't relax at all. If he failed again, the entire Tu family would be too ashamed to face others. Begin. Xinjie appeared in the field and said to the two of them, Is there anything else you want to say? Renbachien smiled. This time, Tu Hong was rather quiet. It seemed that he had learned from his mistakes. Tu Hong only glanced at him before taking large strides forward and reaching out to grab the iron bars in front of him. With this thickness, he could tear it apart like a piece of paper. As long as he could tear this iron cage apart, he would win. No matter how many tricks the other party had, it would be useless. However, the moment his fingers touched the iron cage, it was as if something exploded between his fingers and the iron bars, causing him to subconsciously flick his hands away. Is this the other party's trick? Tu Hong was delighted. Although he didn't know what it was, he was certain that he would win if this was the case. Then he grabbed the iron bars with both hands at an even faster speed. Renbachien smiled when he saw Tu Hong's actions. This cage was full of electricity and if Tu Hong kicked it away he would be the unlucky one. However, it was impossible for Tu Hong to do that. Renbachien's initial request and the actions of the child just now were to induce Tu Hong to grab the cage with his hands. If Tu Hong couldn't jump out of this trap, Renbachien would definitely win. Everyone at the side saw Tu Hong stop after grabbing the iron cage with both hands. His body twitched from head to toe and his beard curled up. Then he fell to the ground with a loud thud. Everyone at the side was shocked. What happened this time? They had clearly seen the child bending the iron cage, but Tu Hong had suddenly collapsed after grabbing onto the iron cage. What had happened? Everyone had no idea what was going on. However, it seemed like Tu Hong couldn't get up. Tu Hong, who was a Cardinal Heaven expert, fell to the ground just like that? Did Ren Baqin, the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, win again? Tu Hong couldn't even tear the cage apart? It seems like it was an experiment that day. Xinjia, who was watching from the side, suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. Although her reaction seemed a little strange, it should be normal, right? Chapter 688. Tu Hong fell to the ground, and the people from the Tu family immediately rushed out to check on him. Fortunately, he was only paralyzed and was fine. What did you do? Tu Yu roared with a twisted face. Trick. Ren Baqin smiled and reached out to touch the cage. Do you want to touch it too? I'll do it. One of the guards immediately stepped forward with a fearless expression as if he was ready to die a martyr. He pulled on the cage with both hands and immediately broke the 2 iron bars. Nothing happened? The guard was prepared to lie on the ground and was a little nervous. However, nothing happened and he scratched his head in confusion. Did you poison it? Have you detoxified it now? Tu Yu suddenly thought of something and said with certainty, when you touched the cage just now, you detoxified the poison on it. After all, Ren Baqin had another identity. Although it was often overlooked, it was easy to remember at this time. He was a poison warrior who had poisoned tens of thousands of people in Great Xia. Do you want to touch it? Ren Baqin laughed. I'll do it. Another guard stepped forward and touched the cage, but nothing happened. Sure enough, you really poisoned it. Now that you have detoxified it, it will be fine for others to touch it. We agreed on a competition, but you actually used poison. Tu Yu shouted as if he had discovered Ren Baqin's secret. Poison? The crowd at the side suddenly became a little chaotic. If Ren Baqin used poison in this competition, it would be a little too much. In order to prove his guess, Tu Yu reached out to touch the cage and found nothing. See, I told you that you used poison. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a strong electric current passed through his body, and he fell to the ground like a pendulum. Smoke began to rise from his head, and a burning smell spread. The electric current is still a little too strong, Ren Baqin thought to himself. Just now he had adjusted the electric current in his sleeve, but it seemed to be a little too strong. Fortunately, it wasn't fatal. Tu Yu. The crowd was in chaos again when they saw Tu Yu's reaction. You really poisoned it? Ren Baqin randomly pointed at someone and said, why don't you touch it? I didn't do anything. I'll touch it then. The man stepped forward and touched the iron bar without saying a word. However, there was no reaction. I'll do it. Another person stepped forward to touch the iron bar. After a moment of trembling, his whole body fell straight down. I'll do it. Another person came up, but there was no reaction. This time, everyone was a little dumbfounded. How could there be a selection? The crowd on the sidelines was also confused. It would take time to detoxify the poison, right? How could 2 people take turns to go up? One was injured while the other was lying down. How did this happen? One person stepped forward to touch the iron bars without saying a word. His body immediately trembled. He did not expect that another person would stand on the other side of the cage and touch the iron bars. According to their thinking, Ren Baqin couldn't possibly attack 2 people in different directions at the same time, right? Then the 2 of them twitched and lay down again. That's why it's scary to be uneducated. Ren Baqin said casually. What did you do to them? Someone shouted. It's just an electric shock. I'll be fine in a while. Ren Baqin turned his head to look at Xinjia, who was in the middle of the arena. It's about time, right? Black Bamboo Academy wins. Xinjia shouted. Cheers erupted from a corner of the arena. The students from the academy had gathered there. At this point in time, many people had guessed what Ren Baqin had done. When they saw the bewildered faces of the people from the 2 residents being toyed with by Ren Baqin, they burst into laughter. As for the others, they looked serious. Up until now, they still did not know how Ren Baqin did it. Principal Ren, did you use poison? Tong Xinye stood up and asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Of course not. Do you think I have the ability to poison a Cardinal Heaven expert in an instant? Ren Baqin laughed. Everyone looked doubtful. It was indeed very difficult to poison a Cardinal Heaven expert in an instant. However, Rinpoche's reputation as a poison warrior still made everyone suspicious. Moreover, whether it's poison or not, you will know once you get someone from the clinic to take a look. Rinpoche put away the iron clamps outside the box, carried the box and crawled out of the cage. What's in the box? Someone immediately asked. What's in the box? You won't understand even if I tell you. As a man-wheel expert, I can't possibly compete with a Cardinal Heaven expert barehanded, right? Rinpoche said casually as he walked. Everyone was speechless. What did he mean by a man-wheel expert? Could he be any more shameless? A man-wheel expert was equivalent to a four-way heaven expert of the Aboriginals. In terms of combat strength, they were weaker than a four-way heaven expert of the same level. At most, they were at the level of an ordinary person. However, no one could say such shameless words that an ordinary person couldn't use external objects to compete with a Cardinal Heaven expert. Furthermore, the two of them were competing with external objects and the strength of their practitioners. Everyone was clear about this. Everyone watched as Rinpoche leisurely walked back while the people from the two residents became the background. They didn't know what to say. Everyone was a little dumbfounded. The impact of these two matches was indeed not small. In the eyes of the Aboriginals, Cardinal Heaven experts were already the top experts and were the lifelong goal of all Aboriginals. However, they were in an extremely sorry state and ended up losing 2 consecutive matches. Although these 2 matches couldn't represent everything, it was enough to illustrate some problems. Rinpoche was also very satisfied. After these 2 matches, he should be able to change the opinions of some people. With these people's opinions changed, it would be easier for him to do things in the future. Furthermore, the students of the academy wouldn't have to be looked down upon in the future. Just as Rinpoche was about to reach the Empress, everyone's attention was attracted by the people in the center of the arena. An extremely powerful aura rose from the center of the arena. Tu Hong's entire body was covered with greenish-black veins. He stood up straight from the ground, looked up at the sky and roared, "I'm not convinced." Rinpoche immediately stopped, turned around and looked at Tu Hong with an amused expression. "You still want to compete? Let's compete again. I don't believe that I can't win after painstakingly attaining the Cardinal Heaven level." Tu Hong roared angrily. His face was full of unwillingness, anger and grievance. "Then what do you want to compete in?" Rinpoche felt that he should give his opponent a chance. "Our fists." Tu Hong roared without hesitation. "You are stronger than me in terms of fists, but I can agree to compete in destructive power. We don't need to compete in anything else. We just need to find an object and compete in destructive power. Based on my calculations, 7 days later is an auspicious day," Rinpoche said. "Let's compete in this." Upon hearing this, Tu Hong spat out these 4 words. He closed his eyes and the skin all over his body exploded. Fresh blood spurted out from the surface of his skin as he fell backward. Chapter 689. The second floor of Shanhui Building had always been the gathering point for the children of the officials in Lan City. If a brick was thrown in and hit 2 people, at least one of them would be the son of a rank 5 official and the other would be a rank 4 official or above. However, there was a gloomy atmosphere in Shanhui Building. I didn't expect Sir Tu to lose 2 rounds in a row. I thought that a Cardinal Heaven expert would definitely win. Someone sighed. "How much did you lose?" The person who sighed stretched out 2 fingers. 200 taels? Where did you get so much money?" "It's 110 taels. Not only did I lose all my wealth, but I also lost 100 taels from my small group." "Your entire wealth is only 10 taels?" "Nonsense. You borrowed 5 taels from me at Jinyu Building previously. Otherwise I would have 15 taels. Stop talking nonsense and return the money." If the young masters of Great Xia and the Yun Nation heard their conversation, they would laugh themselves to death. Not to mention the children of the aristocratic families, even the young masters of the wealthy families were rich. 100 taels? It wasn't even enough for them to drink in the brothel. However, to the pitiful young masters of the Aboriginals, this was already a huge sum of money. Most of them only had a monthly allowance of 10 taels, and the better ones only had a monthly allowance of a few dozen taels. Even Tong Lan, a genius who had attained the Kismet Heaven realm before the age of 10 and whose grandfather was a rank 3 official, only had a monthly allowance of 30 taels. In the previous 2 rounds, many people had lost even more than their faces. Not only did they lose all of their monthly allowance, but they also lost all of their younger siblings' wealth. Now these people were just waiting for a time to gather at the top of the clock tower. Of course, there were a few people who weren't affected. For example, Hong Xian, Bai Shihu and Shi Yueya. Although the students from the school won some, there were too many people who bet on 2 Hong. After compensating the students, they still made a lot of money. Lu Ruiyao was the only one who looked unhappy. She had bet on 2 Hong twice in a row. Even with the bonus of being the banker, she still lost a lot. More importantly, that guy actually won 2 rounds. There was nothing more tragic than losing money while her enemy was in the limelight. Ting, 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 footsteps could be heard coming from the stairs. It sounded like there were at least a dozen people. Hong Xian were here to withdraw money. Su Peng walked up the stairs in front and swept a glance at the gloomy atmosphere on the second floor. He felt a burst of joy in his heart as he laughed heartily. When the people on the second floor saw that Su Peng and the person behind him were all students from the Black Bamboo Academy, they snorted coldly. What's the hurry? Have you never seen money before? Lu Ruiyao raised her head and said with a sharp tongue. In any case, she disliked Ren Baqin and everyone from the Black Bamboo Academy. Of course it's urgent. I'm still waiting to bet on the next round. I don't know if you guys will be the banker again. Su Peng beamed with joy. He had made a fortune this time. In other words, the odds of 110 for the first round had earned many students a huge sum of money. Many of the commoner students also took out a few taels of silver for him to bet, and the total sum was not a small sum. Not to mention, most of the students in the academy were the children of officials. Although their monthly allowance was much lower than the others due to their low talent, they didn't have much time to drink or play after entering the academy. Instead, they had saved up quite a bit of money. When added together, it was a huge sum. Many people were furious when they heard what Su Peng said. Everyone upstairs had lost money, but that group of people actually came to their door to ask for money. Many of them looked fierce and wondered if they should slap them to the ground first to satisfy their craving. However, as more and more people went up to the second floor, especially the 2 people who appeared at the end, these people restrained themselves a little. However, they still glared at them. I haven't seen everyone in a long time. Shurgan went upstairs, cupped his hands and smiled at everyone. Umph. Tong Lan's small face was almost up to the sky, and she acted as if she didn't see anyone. What's there to be arrogant about, little girl? Someone said unhappily. Who are you talking about? Tong Lan immediately glared at him. Little girl, you're not tall, but you have a big temper. That person snorted. I'm a little taller than you. Tong Lan's voice suddenly sounded from that person's table. In a flash, Tong Lan landed on that person's table and stepped on his head. That person's 2 fists formed a bull's horn posture. He used one hand to block Tong Lan's foot, and the other fist to punch Tong Lan's lower abdomen. Tong Lan was quite famous and many people knew that the Tong family had a genius. However, Tong Lan was only 11 years old, and only a few people had seen her fight. He didn't mind trying to see if she was as powerful as the rumors said. Stop. Hong Xian appeared at the table and stopped the 2 of them. Tong Lan's foot and Hong Xian's palm collided. Tong Lan did a backflip and landed on the ground. The table that she was stepping on was also broken into pieces. Hong Xian took 2 steps back. When Tong Lan landed on the ground, the corners of her mouth curled up, revealing her 2 small canine teeth. Then she pointed at Hong Xian and said, "What's on your head?" Hong Xian was stunned and reached out to touch her hair. However, at this moment Tong Lan suddenly erupted. She opened her hands like the huge mouth of a ferocious beast, and her 10 fangs were the fangs in her mouth. She tried to bite Hong Xian. Rip. Even though Hong Xian's reaction was fast, she couldn't defend in time, and Tong Lan tore a piece of cloth from her shoulder. What are you doing? Hong Xian took a few steps back and said angrily, I heard that you are quite powerful and I want to try. Tong Lan said with a little excitement on her face. Then she charged forward. Tong Lan, we are here for serious business. Shurgan appeared behind Tong Lan and tried to grab the back of her neck. In the end, Tong Lan kicked his hand away like a scorpion swinging its tail. However, after being entangled by Shurgan, Hong Xian got into a good stance and said, I don't intend to fight with you. Don't be overbearing. Tong Lan. Shurgan had a helpless look on his face. Forget it. This time I am here to collect my pocket money. I will find trouble with you next time. Tong Lan pondered for a moment and said to Hong Xian with her small face, By Shurhu, get someone to settle the bill for them. Hong Xian shook her head and said to a burly man sitting in the corner. Even though the fight didn't end, everyone knew that this girl named Tong Lan wasn't a kind person. She brazenly attacked Hong Xian, who was very famous among the younger generation. Furthermore, she didn't provoke her. It seemed like Lan City would have another ancestor in the future. Are you guys still going to open the bet? Su Ping asked with a smile. He exclaimed in his heart that it was indeed the right decision to bring Tong Lan over. Even though he was sometimes bullied by Tong Lan, this fierce girl, was still more of a deterrent to people who weren't from the school. Of course. Principal Ren's payout is 2-1, and Sir Tu's payout is 1-2, the burly man in the corner said honestly. So little? Su Peng was surprised. The first time it was 1-10 and the last time it was 1-1. Why was it 2-1 now? Who doesn't know about what happened in the north? Even though Sir Tu is a Cardinal Heaven expert, Principal Ren has already won 2 rounds, so the payout will naturally decrease, the burly man said slowly. Calculate our bets and bet it all on Principal Ren, Su Peng said directly. Even though it was a little less, it was still something. Why wouldn't they accept free money? Are you really going to bet it all? Wang Xian asked. All? Su Peng said decisively. Chapter 690. Tai Tu, are you really going to bet on Sir Tu? Didn't you bet on that person previously? Now that Sir Tu has lost 2 rounds, are you going to bet on him? In my opinion, Sir Tu is in danger this time. Have you heard about what happened in the north? Back then, that person sent something to the Great Xia barracks and killed the commander of the Great Xia army. I don't care about that. I never look at these things when I bet. I only look at the odds. Whichever odds are higher. If you don't bet, then bet on a big one. All in. All in. If you win, book the entire brothel, and if you lose, go back to the mountains to hunt. A dark-skinned, fierce-looking youth was beaming with joy as he stood on the street. Your family is really strange. Everyone has a monthly allowance, but you still want to go hunting in the mountains. A youth laughed. My father said that strength is gained through fighting, not through training. He fought all the way from the mountains to Lan City like this. He always said that if you can't even beat the beast cubs in the mountains, then you are useless. 7 days passed in a flash. During these 7 days, 2 huge concrete cubes with a length, width, and height of 10 meters were built 5 kilometers outside the city. These 2 concrete cubes were made of stone concrete. They were made from stone and concrete with a diameter of half a meter. Their extremely strong hardness and huge size were sufficient for testing. 7 days later, everyone gathered outside the city again. A group of people looked at the huge metal pipe placed at the side and whispered to each other, guessing the function of the metal pipe. Is it a weapon? Is it used to smash people? I don't know. Who do you think will win this time? Logically speaking, I definitely think that Sir Tu will win, but after the 2 rounds of competition, I don't know anymore. Everyone nodded. Cardinal Heaven experts were the pinnacle in the hearts of the Aboriginals. They were the top experts. If someone was said to be able to defeat a Cardinal Heaven expert in the past, they would have laughed hysterically. However, after the 2 rounds of competition, everyone's thinking had changed. The principal of the Black Bamboo Academy was indeed skilled. Of course, if they were to fight, it was obvious that the Cardinal Heaven expert would win. However, if they were to compete, the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, who had endless tricks up his sleeves, would be unpredictable. He's here. His Majesty is here. While everyone was talking, someone suddenly shouted. Everyone immediately dispersed and made way for the Empress's imperial chariot. This time, no matter who wins or loses, let's end it like this. In the carriage, the Empress reclined on a thick animal skin and held a copy of One Piece in her hand. She didn't even raise her head as she spoke to Ren Baqian. I know that you need to establish your authority if you want them to change their minds. However, according to your words, you can't always take advantage of a sheep's fur, and you can't always grab him and bully him. Got it. Ren Baqian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yes, it was indeed not a good idea to bully someone. In any case, he was a Cardinal Heaven expert and one of the top experts in the Aboriginals. Tu Hong was probably doubting his life now. The carriage stopped and Ren Baqian jumped down first. He turned around and extended his hand to help the Empress up. However, when he turned around, he realized that the Empress had already disappeared. When he turned his head again, he realized that the Empress was already sitting on the chair. Greetings, Your Majesty. Everyone bowed in unison. Well, get ready to start, the Empress said faintly and shifted her gaze back to the comic in her hand. Xanja stepped forward and said, I won't say much about the rules. There are 2 concrete blocks in front, and the winner will be determined by the degree of destruction. Sir Tu, Principal Ren, get ready. Sir Tu, you first. Ren Baqian chuckled. Tu Hong glanced at him, didn't say a word, and strode toward the 2 huge blocks in front of him. These 2 blocks were the result of the prisoners of war working day and night. They had been built the day before yesterday, and Ren Baqian had seen them personally. He had sufficient confidence in them. As he got closer, the blocks became bigger and bigger in his field of vision. Tu Hong's body was like a tiny dot in front of the blocks, and the contrast was extremely strong. 2 meters in front of the blocks almost occupied his entire field of vision. In front of him was a city wall, and it was much thicker than the city wall. Tu Hong's clothes exploded, and green veins began to crawl all over his body. Then, the fine veins turned into a greenish-gray color and wandered around Tu Hong's body. Everyone in the distance could feel the strong aura. Those who were weaker could even feel the pressure on their hearts. Tu Hong took a deep breath, raised his arms slightly, and struck a pose with his fists up and down. Then he stomped on the ground and soared into the sky. Countless shadows of his fists smashed into the middle of the blocks. Bang! With his fists as the landing point, the gravel flew in all directions with a piercing sound. A huge pit that was 1 meter deep appeared in the middle of the block, and cracks spread in all directions from the center point. Cracks flowed on the concrete block, and small pieces of rock peeled off. The moment Tu Hong's feet landed on the ground, boom! The 10-meter-tall concrete cube shattered with a loud bang, turning into countless gravel that fell down. Renbachien stood in the distance and smacked his lips. This scene was indeed very shocking, both visually and in terms of the destructive power contained within. Such a huge cube was actually shattered in a single move. Furthermore, it was solid and not hollow. It was a concrete block of 1,000 cubic meters. This wasn't something that could be achieved with a few thousand kilograms of strength. Fortunately, he had never underestimated the martial arts in this world. Even though he was amazed, he could still accept it. Li Fu could collapse a mountain with a single strike. If he really looked at everything in this world with a scientific perspective, he would have gone crazy a long time ago. He had to accept that many times, this world simply couldn't be viewed with the current scientific perspective. Hearing the exclamations from the sidelines and looking at the landslide in front of him, Tu Hong smiled. Then the skin on his body exploded and blood spurted 3 meters high. His entire body fell to the sky. I should be able to win this time, right? Li Fu thought to himself as he looked at the sky above his head. After burning his essence and blood twice, his strength hadn't recovered to its peak. In order to win this time, he had to go all out. Fortunately, he was prepared this time. Tu Wan immediately brought Tu Hong back to the clinic for treatment. Sir Ren, it's your turn. Tu Wan turned to look at Renbachien and said in a deep voice, I'm already preparing. Renbachien nodded and was assembling his killer weapon this time, the 300mm mortar. The barrel was brought back from Earth by Renbachien and was made of alloy. In order to reduce the accuracy and range, the barrel was shortened by a lot, and the weight of the barrel was reduced to 600 kilograms. The support frame and chassis were rushed by the Ministry of Works. The bipod weighed 1,700 kilograms, while the chassis weighed 3,800 kilograms. Naturally, there was only one shooting angle. Based on this angle, the range was 1,500 meters. As for the shell, Renbachien only prepared one. It weighed 960 kilograms and contained 450 kilograms of CL-20 explosives. Its power was 16 times that of TNT of the same weight. In other words, this shell was equivalent to the power of 3 tons of TNT. Chapter 691. Renbachien calmly watched as the craftsmen from the Ministry of Works installed the mortar. The base weighed close to 2 tons and 2 people could carry it. Home of 2 feet weighed 1,700 jin, and 1 person could carry it on his shoulders. Sometimes, Renbachien felt that it was a waste of talent to not send these people to build the pyramids. All the parts were made by the Ministry of Works with the blueprints, and the card slots at the joints were all hand-hammered out. Although there were some minor problems, it was no big deal when it was installed. If there was a problem, such as the connection buckle being a little too big, the craftsman would hammer it down and rub it with an iron bar, and it would fit in. There was nothing wrong with the saying that strength creates miracles. It took half an hour for the mortar to be installed. Your Majesty, let everyone retreat, Renbachien said. The Empress shifted her gaze away from the manga and narrowed her eyes as she looked at his face. The sunlight behind Renbachien was somewhat dazzling. We're already so far away. Isn't that enough? The Empress asked as she pointed at the concrete cube in the distance. It's too close. I'm afraid of an accident. It's best to retreat 2,000 steps, Renbachien said. In order to make it easier for them to watch, they stood no more than 200 meters away from the concrete block. It was too close and it was too easy for them to be accidentally injured. Furthermore, most of the components of this mortar were manufactured in Dayo. If something went wrong, such as the landing point being slightly off target, he was afraid that half of the imperial court would be wiped out. The Cardinal Heaven bigwigs would be fine, but half of the officials would be dead or injured. Even if there were no problems, the destructive range of the fragment was not small, and it would definitely include this place. The Empress looked at him suspiciously and asked, "Don't tell me you used a nuclear warhead?" With regards to the might of a nuclear bomb, the Empress was still extremely fearful. That thing wasn't something that a human could withstand head-on. If she was far away from the explosion, she was confident that she could escape. If she had been too close to the explosion site, she could clearly remember the video and photos she had seen at the time. The consequences would have been very serious. It's not a nuclear bomb. That control is too strict. They won't let go no matter what. However, the power of this cannonball isn't weak. Otherwise, how can everyone be convinced? Ren Baqin said. The Empress looked suspiciously at Ren Baqin again before calling Xenger over. Get everyone to take 1,500 steps back. Yes. Xenger didn't ask any questions and turned around to make the arrangements. After that, the crowd at the back started to get chaotic. Although they didn't know what His Majesty had planned, they gradually retreated. Could it be that that person's moves are too powerful, and Your Majesty is afraid of hurting us? Lu Ruiyao said in a strange tone as she walked backward with her hands behind her back. Who knows? Hong Xian said indifferently. There must be a reason why His Majesty made such arrangements. We'll just have to wait and see. Then he said coldly, Young Sparrow Hawk, you've gone too far. You even dare to question His Majesty. Lu Ruiyao was stunned for a moment, then she said softly, I'm sorry. It's not that I'm sorry. It's just that you're in danger. Hong Xian shook her head and warned. I'll be careful. After everyone had retreated to the back, Ren Baqin got someone to clear the space in front and behind the mortar. He then opened the box and carefully took out a mortar shell that was the size of a human. Although he knew that this thing wouldn't explode easily, holding such a big bomb made him feel uneasy. Under everyone's gaze, Ren Baqin carefully stuffed the human-sized cannonball into the cannon barrel. He then took a few steps back and shouted, Sure who? Sir. Sure who stepped forward with a puzzled look on his face. Why was he being called at this time? Pull this trigger when I give the order. Ren Baqin pointed to a trigger on the side of the rear. Understood. Sure who nodded. Be careful, Ren Baqin reminded him. After hearing this, Sure who immediately took it seriously. Ren Baqin ran to the side for more than 10 meters, covered his ears with both hands and said, Pull the trigger. Bang. There was a loud sound and everyone around felt the ground shake. Those with sharp eyes could see a black object rising into the sky along with the smoke. After all, the initial speed of this mortar shell wasn't fast. The group of people looked at the sky and then at the cube in front of them, waiting to see what would happen. After a few breaths, everyone vaguely saw a small dot fall from the sky and make the sound of a fist tearing through the air. Boom. The sound of the explosion was so loud that it almost deafened everyone. Following the explosion, everyone felt the ground shake violently, as if an earth dragon was turning over. In front of them, where there were originally 2 concrete cubes, a huge fireball mixed with smoke rose into the air. The shock wave set off a heat wave that rushed in all directions. It was like a grade 7 or 8 gale, causing some of the weaker people to lose their balance and crash into each other. Gravel flew more than 1,000 meters from the center of the explosion and smashed onto everyone, but they didn't seem to feel anything. Everyone stared at this unexpected scene with their mouths agape. Even Ren Baqin, who was squatting at the side with his hands covering his ears, was ignored. It was like the end of the world, and it was completely beyond everyone's understanding. Even the most powerful person would not be able to unleash such a powerful attack. Whether it was Tong Jinye, Tu Wan, Qin Chuan, the Zhang family or Qingyun Sword, who was leaning against the city wall and watching this scene, the students of the academy and Hong Xian's small group, they were all speechless when they saw this scene that was beyond everyone's imagination. Everyone was stunned. Even everyone in Lan City was alarmed by the news. After all, the explosion was too close. It was only 2,000 meters away from Lan City, and the strong tremors could even be felt on the other side of the city. Not to mention the deafening sound that sounded like the wrath of God. When the smoke gradually dissipated, the concrete cubes in the distance had disappeared. Even the gravel that Tu Hong had smashed just now was gone. All that was left was a huge pit that had a radius of more than 10 meters. There was not a single blade of grass within 100 meters of the pit, and even the trees that were 100 meters away had been broken. Outside the city, there was complete silence. Then there was the sound of people gasping. Your Majesty, I'll go and take a look. Tang Jinya's eyes seemed to be emitting light. In a flash, he appeared in the distance, but he quickly ran back every few seconds with smoke coming out from his beard. Hot, hot, it's too hot. Tang Jinya patted his beard as soon as he landed. Then he asked Feng Ho pitifully, "What happened to my beard? This old man seems to smell something burning. Shave it. It's hopeless." Feng Ho snapped out of his shock and looked at Tang Jinya. His beard had curled up. At this time, everyone came back to their senses. It was a mess outside the city and everyone was discussing the scene just now in shock. Everyone knew that Rinpoche definitely had a trump card, but no one expected it to be such a big one that they were all shocked. After another 2 hours, the temperature at the center of the explosion slowly dropped, allowing everyone to get closer. Everyone gathered around and saw that there was a huge pit with a radius of 50 to 60 meters and a depth of more than 20 meters. This power wasn't just big, but it was simply terrifying. After marveling at this terrifying destructive power, everyone's faces gradually became strange. A huge concrete block was in the pit. It wasn't too big and was only a quarter of an intact block. However, the problem was that Tu Hong's block had been smashed into small pieces, and there wasn't even a trace of it left. It had been blown away by the shock wave just now. With such a big piece inside, it could only be Rinpoche's target. If both parties competed in making pits in the ground, Rinpoche would undoubtedly be the winner. There was no doubt about the power of the attack just now. Just the visual effect alone was shocking enough, and the power was even more astonishing. The problem was that both parties' targets were the two huge concrete cubes. In other words, Rinpoche used an extremely destructive attack that exceeded everyone's imagination, and lost. Rinpoche was speechless when he saw that piece of concrete in the pit. He smiled awkwardly and said, "I missed. It seems that Sir Tu won this round." From the looks of it, the mortar shell just now stuck close to the concrete cube and then exploded. Since it exploded from below, most of the concrete was blown up, and the rest was sent flying upward before falling into the pit. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. Su Peng and the others at the side were even more shocked. They were even more shocked than when they saw the explosion just now. "You made such a big scene and made such a big pit and then you tell us that you missed? Are you trying to kill us? My pocket money?" Tong Lan looked like she was on the verge of collapsing. If it weren't for someone holding her back, she would have rushed up and fought with Rinpoche. "Ha, that's what I said. Who cares about this and that? Let's bet big. All in. Whichever has the higher odds. The winner will book the brothel and the loser will go hunting in the mountains." A ferocious-looking young man laughed wildly. "Dad, tonight at Jinyu restaurant it's my treat." Chapter 692. The match between Rinpoche and Tu Hong was finally over. When the results were out, some people were happy while others were sad. The students from the academy looked miserable. Almost all of them had lost and were gnashing their teeth in anger. They wanted to fight Rinpoche to the death. The ones who were happy were Hong Xian and the others, or the people from the Protectorate of the North and the Protectorate of the South who were in charge of affairs in Lan City. They had made a small profit this time. Although this amount of money wasn't a lot for the two protectorates, it was still very useful. Most of the people returned with different thoughts in their minds. In any case, these matches allowed many people to see the effects of external objects. They weren't as unbearable as they had always thought. Especially in the last match, although Rinpoche's shot was off target, it could be said that it was a glorious defeat. In terms of destructive power alone, it was shocking and much more important than Rinpoche's previous reputation as a poison warrior. Even in a crowded situation, the number of people killed by this bomb was only a fraction of the number of people who were poisoned to death. Even experts like Tang Jinya and Qin Xuan couldn't create such a huge pit with a length and width of 50 to 60 meters and a depth of 20 meters, but Rinpoche did it as an ordinary person. Under special circumstances or carelessness, even a Cardinal Heaven expert would be seriously injured or even killed by this attack. If there were 10 or 100 of such things, even a Cardinal Heaven expert would have to take a detour. The value of Black Bamboo Academy and Rinpoche's strength had greatly increased in everyone's hearts. Even the students of Black Bamboo Academy were re-evaluated. After that explosion, Black Bamboo Academy truly became the #1 academy in Dayo. Of course, Dayo didn't have a second academy. It didn't even have a school. However, Black Bamboo Academy's status had greatly increased in everyone's hearts. As the principal, Rinpoche's status had instantly risen to the level of a Cardinal Heaven expert. This time, not only did no one gossip, but many people began to wonder if they could also send their own disciples to the academy. In any case, besides practicing martial arts, they usually went around fighting. Going to the academy wouldn't affect their martial arts training and could even learn some things from Rinpoche. Over the next few days, the news and results of the duel between Rinpoche and Tu Hong began to spread throughout Lan City. After all, the explosion was too loud and could be said to have alarmed the entire city. It was impossible to hide it even if one wanted to. For the next few days, there were people discussing it on the streets and alleys. Many people even specially went to the outskirts of the city to see the big pit. When they found out that it was created by Rinpoche, they were all astonished. The commoner disciples of the academy became celebrities for a few days in a row. When they returned from school, they were surrounded by a group of people asking all sorts of questions. Some were curious about Rinpoche, some were inquiring about what they learned from the academy, and some were inquiring about how to enter the academy. This allowed them to finally gain some comfort after experiencing the great loss of becoming rich and losing their family fortune. After all, if the academy became famous, they would also feel honored. More directly, the treatment they received in and out of the street every day was different. This was something everyone could feel. Rinpoche placed the book on the lectern and swept his gaze across the classroom. Their bitter and hateful faces finally looked a little better today. After all, time could erase everything, including losing one's family fortune. In any case, he would treat it as a lesson to them. Uncontrollable things like gambling and jumping off cliffs should be kept away. That afternoon, the attention of the students was focused on another matter, which was how to send the train out of the city. These days, the construction of the railway tracks in the academy and the outskirts of the city didn't stop at all. Everything was finally completed, and the next step was to test the train. However, how to send the train out of the city was still a problem. One option was to push the train over since it had wheels. However, this idea was immediately opposed by a bunch of people. After all, trains were currently designed to travel on rails. Inside the wheels was a disc that was larger than the wheels, called the wheel rim. If the train was pushed all the way over, the wheel rim would be scrapped. Furthermore, due to the thickness of the wheel rim and the weight of the train, it was estimated that all the stone slabs along the way would be crushed. Therefore, the best method was to dismantle the train and send it over separately or simply carry it over. As for using an ox cart to transport it, the problem was the same as pushing the train over. All the stone slabs along the way would be crushed. Furthermore, whether the wooden wheels could withstand the weight was another matter. Everyone thought that the train's weight of 6,000 to 7,000 kilograms wasn't a problem, so they simply carried it over. As for the candidate to carry it, Qing Lian was the first choice. She was from Great Xia and didn't get along with everyone. Even after school ended, no one knew where she went. Furthermore, she wasn't very strong. It's best to have an expert on board to share the burden of the others, someone said. Naturally, the experts in the academy were Shurgan and Tong Lan. Tong Lan sat on the train and swung her legs. When she heard what the others said, she immediately stuck out her flat chest and had a proud expression that said, "I won't carry it even if you come and beg me." However, everyone knew that this was her character. If she really had to do it, she wouldn't be careless. Forget about Tong Lan. She's too short. She won't be able to reach it even if she raises her hands, Shurgan said with a smile. Tong Lan, who was on the train, immediately stiffened. She was completely frozen. Too short, too short, too short. These three words struck Tong Lan like lightning. She was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. "What did you say?" Tong Lan glared at Shurgan fiercely. Shurgan raised his bent hands and said unhurriedly, "Can you reach this height?" Looking at the height of Shurgan's hands, Tong Lan's face turned green. This was because she really couldn't reach it. Her height only reached Shurgan's chest. When she raised her hands, she was only slightly taller than Shurgan's head. "All right, let's arrange the rest of the people now." Shurgan laughed. Tong Lan gritted her small canine teeth and had the intention to kill someone. In the end, apart from Qing Lian and Tong Lan, everyone else was divided into 3 batches. Each batch consisted of 10 people and had to take turns every once in a while. Seeing that everyone had broken the courtyard wall and carried the train out, Tong Lan frantically shouted 3 times in the courtyard, "Ah! Is it my fault that I'm short? Is it my fault that I'm short?" After everyone sent the train out of the east gate, they began to rejoice that their decision to carry the train was indeed correct. It was nearing the rainy season and it rained every 2 or 3 days. Even the official roads outside the city would sink into the mud, not to mention that the position of the railway was slightly off. Thus the journey was filled with mud and water. It took half a day to carry the train to its position. There were railway tracks inside and wooden fences surrounding it. There were also many soldiers guarding it. Otherwise, with so many railway tracks, it would have long been carried away. For the next few days, everyone modified the train and checked the condition of the railway tracks. They also added a shed to the back of the train to block the rain and a carriage to load coal. Chapter 693. Clang 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 clang. The noise was accompanied by the vibration under his body, making him feel like he was going to fall apart at any time. In an open space surrounded by fences outside Lan City, there was a circle of rails with a diameter of 400 meters. A train pulling 2 wooden carriages was running along the rails, making clanging sounds continuously. Rinpoche, the Empress, and the rest were in the second carriage behind the train. The wind blew against their faces as the smoke from the locomotive drifted. "It's much faster than an ox cart," Zhuyen, the Minister of Justice, said as he felt the wind. "It's also much steadier," everyone said. With the roads in this world, coupled with the wooden tires and shock absorbers, even riding in the city required extremely strong buttocks, let alone outside the city. After leaving Lan City, it would be a disaster if the ox cart sped up a little. It could even make one vomit out their internal organs. "It's just that the smell is too unpleasant," Yu Shang, the Minister of Agriculture, said as she covered her nose. "After all, there are advantages and disadvantages." Rinpoche smiled and then introduced it to everyone. "This kind of train can travel 70 kilometers in an hour and 140 kilometers in 2 hours. It can travel up to 1,680 kilometers in a day and only takes 2 days to travel from Lan City to the Protectorate of the Northeast or the Protectorate of the North. This is only the current speed. It can continue to increase in the future and even double." "So fast? Doesn't this thing need to rest?" someone immediately asked in surprise. "This isn't a living thing, so it doesn't need to rest like livestock. As long as there's enough coal, it can maintain this speed," Rinpoche explained to everyone. "Also, this kind of train can carry a lot of cargo. It's made of metal, and the load of one carriage is equivalent to about 60 ox carts. It can pull dozens of carriages, which is equivalent to the load of more than 4,000 ox carts. It doesn't require that many people and doesn't consume that much rations. Not only can this kind of train carry a lot of cargo, but it can also be used to transport troops. It only takes 2 days to send tens of thousands of troops to the Protectorate of the Northeast and the Protectorate of the North, which also saves a lot of time and rations. This is especially true when there's a war. Whether it's speed or load, it's completely incomparable to an animal cart. More importantly, with this thing, it will be much easier to rule the Yun nation. No matter what happens there, they can respond and deploy troops in a timely manner. All kinds of resources from the Yun nation can also be transported back in large quantities." Hiss. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. The crowd might not be very clear about the concepts of load and speed, but when it came to the load of more than 4,000 ox carts in the time of 2 days, everyone immediately had a relatively clear idea. One had to know that a carriage of 4-corn cows weighed no more than 500 kilograms, and their speed was even slower. They could only travel a little more than 100 kilometers a day. In other words, a train running for 1 day was equivalent to 4,000 ox carts traveling for 10 days. The amount of manpower, material resources, and rations needed for this was an astronomical figure. Even the Aboriginals understood the value of time. With such a contrast, everyone present was shaken and beaming with joy. It was as if they could drive a train straight to the Yun nation the next day. Principal Ren's words are very moving, and I'm also very moved. However, all of you should know that just these so-called rails below have consumed more than 200,000 kilograms of steel, which is enough to arm 10,000 soldiers. It was thousands of miles from the Yun nation. How much iron was needed? More than 50 million kilograms. Even if Mount Damo was emptied, there might not be so much iron, and the time needed would be in the hundreds of years. Tu-Wan poured a bucket of cold water on everyone from head to toe. Everyone didn't need to count with their fingers. Just hearing that more than 100,000 kilograms of iron was enough to scare them. What was even more frightening was the amount of iron needed to spread from here to the Yun nation. This number had completely exceeded everyone's understanding of numbers. They always felt that this number was inexplicably far away, so far that it seemed impossible to achieve. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at Tu-Wan and Rinpoche, not knowing what to say. "Doesn't that mean that it can't be built at all?" someone sighed. No. My plan is to connect Lan City to the Yun nation in 10 years, not to the Protectorate of the Northeast." Rinpoche waved his hand. "Everyone, please listen to me. In fact, it's not as difficult as you think. Although iron ore is scarce in Dayo, there is no shortage in the Yun nation. As far as I know, there are 7 known iron ore mountains in the Yun Nation, and I'm afraid there are more that have yet to be discovered. This railway is calculated to be 4,000 kilometers long, and according to the standard of 100 kilograms of iron per meter of rail, it will require 400 million kilograms of iron. Even the smallest iron ore mine will contain at least 100,000 kilograms of iron ore. Based on 50% of the iron ore content, there will be 250 million kilograms of iron and steel, which is enough to build such a railway. A slightly larger iron ore mine can build 10 such railways, and a medium-sized iron ore mine can build 100 such railways. Therefore, you don't need to worry about the amount of iron and steel consumed. The Yun Nation has enough iron and steel reserves. As for mining, that's even less of a problem. As long as a prisoner of war can mine 5 kilograms of iron a day, it will be more than 1,500 kilograms a year. The iron ore mines in the Yun Nation aren't like those on Mount Damo. Do you think that each of them can even mine 5 kilograms of iron a day? 100,000 prisoners of war will be able to mine enough iron in 2 years. Rinpoche put aside everything else and used numbers to calculate for everyone. As for mining iron ore, it wasn't a problem in his eyes. The physical fitness of the people in this world was much stronger than that of the people on Earth. If they encountered any problems, there were so many Earthwheel experts who could solve them. If it didn't work out, they could still transport explosives over. Compared to the mining methods on Earth, there were many more ways to mine, and the difficulty was much lower. Furthermore, we can directly build a steel plant in the Protectorate of the Northeast. After smelting in the Protectorate of the Northeast, we can directly build a railway from there to the nation. Even if we fail in the end, the railway can be used for other purposes. It will only consume a little manpower and rations, and we will still be able to obtain a lot of iron and steel. If we succeed, this will be a great achievement for generations to come, and the Yun Nation will be firmly in the hands of the empire. After Rinpoche finished speaking, everyone began to ponder deeply. Qin Chuan scratched his head and said, "Although I don't understand how much is needed, what Sir Rin said makes sense. Sir Rin is definitely more knowledgeable than I am, so I think it will work. If this railway could really be realized, the Ministry of War would also benefit from it." The thought of being able to mobilize troops at will made Qin Chuan excited. "I think that what Sir Rin said is right. If this matter succeeds, the entire Yun Nation will be in the hands of Her Majesty. It will be worth it even if we have to pay a little," Shi Qing said slowly. "I second that." Ko Zhihai nodded. "I am aware of Sir Ren's knowledge and ability." Tong Xinye chuckled and then changed the topic. "However, is there really that much iron in the Yun Nation?" "Definitely and definitely. Iron is one of the most common substances in nature. As long as iron ore is formed, the amount won't be too little. Furthermore, I have been following the most conservative estimates. Based on the level of prospecting in the Yun Nation, most of the iron ores that can be discovered are exposed open-pit mines. The reserves and ore quality may be higher than what I have said. In particular, 3 of the iron ores are very close to each other, and it is very likely that a large iron ore is buried underground. The location of these 3 iron ores is currently where the vanguard of Protector General Zi Donglai's troops is. As long as we continue to push forward, these 3 iron ores will fall into our hands, Rinpoche said. Even Tu Hong didn't say anything else after hearing this. After all, if such a railway could achieve the effect that Rinpoche had mentioned, it would be too valuable and worth the risk. Moreover, they didn't need to pay much. Whether it was the mines or the captives, they were all from the Yun Nation. The most important problem of food could be solved by the pumpkins, sweet potatoes, and other high-yielding crops that Rinpoche had brought. What they had to do was to conquer the Yun Nation, which was originally part of the plan. Everyone had been drooling over the riches of the Yun Nation for a long time. Even if they didn't have this goal, they wouldn't let go of this piece of fat meat, not to mention that it was already on the chopping board. At present, Dayo had successively sent 60,000 reinforcements to the Protectorate of the Northeast. In addition to the original army of the Protectorate of the Northeast, there were a total of 75,000 soldiers, which was close to the original strength of Dayo. All of them had been sent to the Yun Nation. The Yun Nation had now lost a quarter of its land, and the country was in a state of panic. Everyone jumped off the train and watched from the side. After 12 hours without slowing down, just as Rinpoche had said, they were satisfied and returned to the city to arrange the following matters. The plundering of the iron ores and the laying of the railway had become one of the most important things in everyone's mind. The Black Bamboo Academy also had to continue to improve the design of the train to ensure that there wouldn't be any problems. If the speed could be doubled as Rinpoche had said, everyone would wake up laughing even in their dreams. Chapter 694. Zheng Qingmian has great ambitions but little talent. Now that a quarter of the Yun nation's land has been seized by the barbarians, he is still rebuking dissidents in the imperial court, hindering the Western army and cutting off their reinforcements. Nearly 100 people are still under the iron hooves of the barbarians. He is simply incompetent. This time, the barbarians are menacing and completely different from the past. The 500,000 troops of Great Xia have already deployed at the southern front and are fighting with the barbarian general Hong Wu. However, the 70,000 barbarian soldiers in the Yun nation have no intention of retreating. Can't they see their purpose? The barbarians want to destroy the Yun nation this time. However, Zheng Qingmian is still wishful thinking that they will retreat on their own. If the Yun nation is destroyed, you and I will both be doomed. Tomorrow my teacher will depart for Wangjing and fight with his life. My teacher has already contacted more than 10 officials who have returned to their hometown to go to the capital together. Even if he has to knock his head against a drum, he must let His Majesty know how rotten the situation is. If Zheng Qingmian is allowed to do as he pleases, the destruction of the nation is imminent. Although I'm just a scholar, I'm willing to follow teacher. What do you think? In the tavern, a scholar sat at a table and spoke passionately. His young face was slightly flushed due to his hot blood. I'm not talented, but I'm also willing to follow teacher Jing Shan. A scholar opposite him immediately cupped his hands. Let's go together. I'd rather die than wait here to be trampled by the barbarians. The others said passionately. The scholarly spirit was vividly written on the few of them. Good. A burly man at the table next to them slammed the table and cheered. Everyone, although I can't go, I admire all of you. This pot of wine is a toast to all of you. As soon as he said this, many people around him followed suit, which immediately made the scholars excited. As long as the Yun nation still has hot-blooded men like you, the Yun nation will win. After finishing the wine, the burly man asked a few more details, such as whether the guards were safe and who else teacher Jing Shan, who was famous in Jiang City, had invited. He then praised them profusely. After a while, he went downstairs and circled around the city twice before entering a remote courtyard. He recounted everything that happened in the restaurant in full detail. Sir, what do you think? In front of him was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He had a broad forehead and looked like a typical member of the Jing tribe. However, he didn't look much different from the people of the Yun nation. No one would be able to recognize him if he wore a bamboo hat. Although the higher-ups didn't say it, judging from the current situation, I'm afraid that the Yun nation is really going to be destroyed. There's an earth wheel expert among their guards. It seems like I have to deal with them personally. Tomorrow keep an eye on their departure time en route, then kill them. Don't let them go to Wang capital. After the burly man left, the middle-aged man wrote another letter and sent it out on horseback. The next day, a group of carriages, horses, and a dozen or so scholars left Dongqing. However, at noon the next day, someone found their corpses 100 miles away. When the news came back, everyone in River Town was shocked. Zheng Qingmian actually had so many eyes and ears. They had just set off and were intercepted by his men. Well done. Rinpochen was quite happy to receive the news from the northeast. He then returned to the palace and handed the paper to the Empress, who was reading comics. Those people did a good job. Although they acted on their own, I still want to praise them. The value of incorporating these people has already been realized. With such a group of people, many things have become much easier. If they awaken the Yun nation, it will be a little troublesome. We have only occupied a quarter of the territory. If the Yun nation mobilizes the whole nation, our casualties will be much higher. Although this will happen sooner or later with more and more cities falling, it will be too late by the time they react. You can't kill someone with 2 fingers. The Empress stretched out 2 fingers and gestured in front of her. I think they can. Rinpochen spread out his hands and laughed. Well, your Majesty is right. However, the strength of 2 fingers isn't as strong as a fist. The Empress retracted her fingers and said faintly, I understand what you mean. These people have done a good job. I'm clear about rewards and punishments, and I will give them the rewards they deserve. With your Majesty's words, they won't be risking their lives and working hard in the Yun nation. Rinpochen picked up a fruit from beside the Empress's couch and put it in his mouth. It was already June and it was the rainy season. The occasional rainstorm didn't reduce the heat in Lan City, but made it even more stuffy. After the train was shown to the court, everything was going on in an orderly manner. The students at the academy were listening to the class while improving the train. Rinpochen had completely handed over these tasks to them. Even though their progress was slow, their gains were still huge. In addition, the other thing they needed to do was to develop a thermal generator under Rinpoche's guidance from time to time. In fact, the principle of a thermal generator wasn't complicated, and it was easy to achieve initial results. The more important thing was to improve the conversion efficiency and the degree of stability. With the example of the train, many students were quite happy and plunged into the research of the generator. This research, in turn, prompted them to take the initiative to learn. They flipped through the books in the library, and every little bit of progress made them extremely excited. At present, the students at the academy and the outside world had become two completely different circles. They had become an isolated tower. The things that the students at the academy played with were completely unknown to the people outside. They were no longer interested in the things that the people outside played with. In front of them was a brand new world full of unknowns, and every once in a while, they would discover something new in this world. The more they knew, the more problems they would encounter, and the more problems they would solve. These new problems and gains would make them even more excited to continue climbing the mountain. The sense of accomplishment and excitement, as well as the sense of identity that came from working together, was something that nothing else could give them. Even Tong Lan had become one with the other students, even though she still had that arrogant look on her face. However, there were also exceptions in the academy. For example, Xing Lian was obsessed with mathematics and couldn't extricate herself from it. Every day she would hold books on algebra and geometry without letting go of them for even a moment. Faced with all kinds of questions from Xing Lian every day, Rinpoche was forced to pick up the mathematics that he had returned to the teacher long ago. On the other hand, with the maturity of the high-yield crops brought by Rinpoche, the harvest of thousands of kilograms per mu had already made Lan City and the surrounding cities rich in food. New crops such as pumpkins and potatoes began to appear in the market in large quantities and were accepted by the people. These high-yield crops and canned fish, which had been increasing in production, had greatly relieved the pressure brought about by Dayo's repeated conscription over the past year. The Empress also took this opportunity to mobilize more auxiliary troops from more cities to the Yun nation. On the one hand, they had to transport the plundered goods, and on the other hand, they had to manage the prisoners of war and dig the 3 iron mines that they had just obtained. Now that Zedong was plundering money, food, and resources from the Yun nation, a large number of prisoners couldn't be sent back to Dayo in time and could only be guarded or killed on the spot. As for the war with the Qin nation and Great Xia, due to the arrival of the rainy season, the bowstrings and crossbows began to lose their elasticity due to the moisture, and the attacks from both directions slowed down for a while. In other words, the originally loud thunder but little rain gradually began to develop into a situation where they were just bystanders. For this reason, Rinpoche had no choice but to give Su Qing another batch of stink bombs to remind everyone in Great Xia. For Rinpoche, the most important thing was that he was getting closer to breaking through the last visualization of Rui visualization, the visualization of metal. Chapter 695. There were no plants and the ground was dry and cracked. Swords of different shapes were stuck in the ground. Every few steps, there would be a quaint sword half buried in the ground. The background of the sky was a fiery red sunset. The fiery red sky, the surrounding desolation, and the ownerless swords gave Rinpoche a sense of desolation. The land of sharp metal was the name of this place. Rinpoche walked forward slowly. Although he didn't come into contact with anything, there were bloody wounds on his body from time to time. It was as if there were countless invisible swords trying to cut him into pieces. This was the world of the visualization of metal. Everywhere was filled with invisible sharp metal chi. Rinpoche felt that it should be called the infinite sword creation, or the sword tomb. Amit Ba. Rinpoche placed one hand on his chest and chanted the name of Buddha. He emptied his mind and seemed to be able to reduce the pain on his body by doing so. The pain of being cut by sharp blades was everywhere. Rinpoche suddenly felt a chill in his crotch. The calmness in his heart was suddenly broken, and his whole face was distorted. Damn it! He pulled open his pants in fear and looked down. Fortunately, the string of treasures was still there. It was just that there were 2 small wounds on his body. After the chill, he began to feel a burning pain. Although the other visualizations also caused him to die from drowning in the visualization of water, being blown down by the wind and falling to his death from the visualization of earth, being burned to death from the visualization of fire, being roasted to death from the visualization of metal, and being burned to death from the visualization of metal. The sharp metal chi was everywhere and undetectable. Some stayed in place and waited for him to bump into it. Some were activated when he passed by the swords, and he didn't know where the next cut would come from. Rinpoche often felt a chill in his crotch which made him feel cold from head to toe. He could tolerate other things but not this. Every time he entered the visualization of metal, the positions of the swords and the positions of the sharp metal chi were different. Rinpoche couldn't figure out the pattern and could only try his luck as he walked forward. Moreover, the process of dying in the land of sharp metal was extremely long. Almost every time, they would walk for an unknown amount of time before they ran out of blood and returned to the real world. After fastening his pants, he walked forward for a long time. Not a single part of his body was intact, and half of his left palm was missing. Rinpoche staggered forward. The loss of blood had made his strength weaker and weaker, and his vision had started to blur. Rinpoche placed his hand on the hilt of the sword beside him. The tanned leather was very delicate to the touch. However, a ray of sword chi shot out from the hilt and pierced his right hand. However, he didn't seem to notice anything. He just stared at an empty space 100 meters in front of him. The empty space was surrounded by densely packed ancient swords, and there was only one sword in the middle of the empty space. It was like the Emperor of Swords, standing alone and accepting the worship of the other subjects. Rinpoche knew that as long as he pulled out the sword, he would be able to pass the visualization of metal. He struggled to move his feet and walked for another 10 meters. Suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his foot and half of his foot was missing. Rinpoche couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. He crawled for another 10 meters before his vision turned black. When he opened his eyes again he was back in the room in Pingle Park. Rinpoche didn't say anything else. He first took off his pants to take a look and checked again. After confirming that there was no problem with the function, he was relieved. He was always worried that he would come out of the visualization of metal one day and realize that he was impotent. For example, he had heard a lot of experiments like binding a person blindfolded, making a cut on the wrist and then using a water pipe to drip water just like letting out blood. In the end the person died. Fortunately, Rinpoche's worries didn't come true. However, Rinpoche knew that after practicing the Rui visualization, his tolerance for pain was extremely high. For example, something like a bone fracture. If it was in the past, he would have been in so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, as his cultivation progressed, he didn't seem to take it seriously. Even if he was accidentally pushed by the Empress and suffered a bone fracture, he just looked miserable and didn't feel much emotional. In addition, his reverence for death was getting lower and lower. The world of the Rui visualization began to affect his perception of death. Although he clearly knew that death in the real world wasn't like the Rui visualization, it was also another beginning. However, everything in the Rui visualization was too real. That kind of feeling of death was too real. Regardless of whether it was drowning, falling, burning, or bleeding to death after experiencing death countless times, it was very difficult for him not to be affected. The result was that he had died too many times in the Rui visualization. No matter how miserable the way of dying was, he had tried it countless times. He began to lose his reverence for death, whether it was himself or other people. He didn't know whether these changes were good or bad. Although the practice of the Rui visualization wasn't as arduous as other martial arts techniques, with the help of a large number of medicinal herbs, the speed of cultivation could be said to be much faster than those geniuses with exceptional talent. In just 1.5 years he went from an ordinary person to the threshold of the earth wheel level. However, there was such a huge problem that he didn't know if it was a hidden danger or not. Perhaps he would only understand what kind of impact it had on his future when he looked back on it a long time later. After waking up, Rinpoche went out and kicked Tian Tian and Gun Gun, who pounced on him with their mouths full of fangs. He also kicked Ting Ting, who was dizzy and disoriented. Then he started his daily routine as if nothing had happened. The death in the visualization of metal, and the realization at that time could be recovered as long as he slept and didn't have any impact on himself. After all, after such a long time of practice, he already knew how to adjust himself. He had to admit that many things from those baldies were quite useful. Although Rinpoche only thought of the phrase, Amitabha Buddha, when he killed people or when he was killed in the Rui visualization, Rinpoche pondered for a while. He seemed to have the title of Bodhisattva and didn't know how that little monk was doing. At noon that day, Rinpoche received a letter from the little monk asking for help. This made Rinpoche feel that he had the gift of foresight or the gift of a crow's beak. Bodhisattva, there's nothing to eat. Xingrua is about to starve to death. However, the teachings of Buddhism have not been passed down and the benefactress has not understood the wonders of conversion. Xingrua still has to be saved. Bodhisattva, please send some food. Note, food for 1,000 people. Looking at this message that came out of nowhere from Tianjin Basin, Rinpoche scratched his head. Back then, didn't his master ask him to snatch a man from the benefactress? How did it become about converting the benefactress? What exactly happened to this little monk Xing Rua? After a series of inquiries, Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. During this period of time, the little monk had been doing quite well in preaching in Tianjin Basin. Over the past year he had gained a few thousand followers. From a few dozen followers to a few thousand followers, this was already considered very impressive for a little monk who wasn't even 10 years old. Of course, this was also related to the massacre in Tianjin Basin by Shiwanya and the chaos in Jiangbei City. After that little monk had gained some followers and advocated for the people to help each other, which helped them get through the most difficult period. Although the current situation wasn't very good, it was much better than the situation in Jiangbei City. After that, he actually went to convert prostitutes. It should be said that those prostitutes were women who lost their families due to the war and couldn't make a living. They were reduced to the streets in exchange for food. They were also a group of pitiful people. Chapter 696. In the following days Rinpoche kept trying. The most recent time he bled to death at the edge of the Boundless Sword Formation. The furthest he went was about 200 meters away from the Boundless Sword Formation before his throat was pierced by a sword that suddenly appeared. However, Rinpoche knew that he was very close to breaking through. No matter how the sharp metal energy and the sword formation changed, he was still advancing. A distance of 100 meters. If he was lucky he would be able to break through the next time. If he was unlucky he might need to try 10 or 20 times. After another half a month he was missing 4 fingers on one hand, and his other hand was broken at the elbow. He was missing an ear and he was blind in one eye. There was almost no part of his body that was intact. He looked as miserable as he could be. However, this couldn't stop the fire in his heart. He had finally walked out of the sword formation. After more than 7 months he had died more than 200 times. There wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't injured. However, he had finally walked out. Ah! Rinpoche roared at the sky and used all his strength to stride forward. However, before he had even walked half the distance, he felt a sharp pain coming from his knee. He lost his balance and fell forward. At that moment, his injured calf was chopped off by the sharp metal energy that was floating in the air. Bang! Rinpoche fell heavily on the ground. His heart trembled. The feeling of falling again and again, bleeding to death surfaced in his heart. He secretly clenched his teeth. Could it be that he was going to fail again? However, even if he failed he couldn't just wait for death here. Even if he was a little closer to that sword, the chances of success would be higher next time. Rinpoche clenched his teeth and crawled forward with his hands and feet. The wounds on his body were covered with sand, and at the same time, a long trail of blood was left on the ground. The strength in his body was getting weaker and weaker, and his body was getting colder and colder. However, the distance between him and that sword was getting closer and closer. If others could see this scene in his consciousness, they would be able to feel the tenacity exuding from Rinpoche's body. If it was someone else who kept dying over and over again like this, those who were weak would have given up long ago. Even if an ordinary person didn't break down, their personality would change drastically. However, Rinpoche persevered time and time again and never relaxed. Normally he would even laugh and cry. Even Rinpoche himself didn't expect his mental fortitude to be this strong. However, in Dayo's 1.5 years, he had honed his skills to such an extent. Even with his broken elbows and exposed knees, he still crawled forward bit by bit, even though every movement would cause him severe pain. He had forgotten the passage of time. Even though his body was extremely weak, he did not die. With his last breath he crawled to the sword. A sword with a red hilt made of an unknown material. Unlike the other ownerless swords that were broken, this sword's entire body was bright as snow, as if it was meticulously cleaned by its owner every day. Moreover, there were no patterns on it. There was only an inclined surface in the middle of the blade. It seemed that the middle of the blade was much thicker than the 2 sides of the blade. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Rinpoche lay on the ground and laughed. The sword was right in front of his fingertips, and his fingertips could almost feel the coldness of the blade. He could finally touch it. Stand up, stand up. Rinpoche mumbled softly after he had laughed enough. He used the hand that was missing 3 fingers to support his body and slowly lifted his upper body. He then realized that he was completely unable to stand up due to his missing left arm and leg. Rinpoche gritted his teeth and used his broken arm to support himself on the ground. The pain of his flesh rubbing against the sand and gravel on the ground, as well as the pain from all over his body, almost made him groan in pain. The simple action of getting up took him a full minute. Blood and sweat continuously spilled on the ground below him. If he moved a little slower, the pain might be less, but it would take too long. Rinpoche didn't know how long his current body could hold on. He struggled to kneel on the ground and pressed his broken knee to the ground. Rinpoche was finally able to reach for the hilt of the sword. He could touch it with his hand and it felt moist just like skin. Whether it was the texture or the texture, it made Rinpoche feel that the sword hilt was wrapped in blood-stained human skin. Ha! Rinpoche let out a long breath that reeked of blood. All that was left was to pull the sword out. Rinpoche tried hard to lift his arm, but the sword didn't budge an inch. He tried 3 times in a row and used up most of his remaining strength, but the sword still didn't budge an inch. I don't have enough strength. I have to stand up, Rinpoche muttered to himself while gasping for air. The blood loss and pain made it very difficult for him to breathe. Rinpoche used 2 fingers and his palm to firmly hold the sword hilt. He shifted his center of gravity forward and used his hand to support his body to stand up. Chi! To his surprise, the sword was actually pressed down by the strength of his body. It was as if it had pierced through something below and made a soft sound. Hee. Rinpoche laughed inexplicably. He always thought that he had to pull the sword out. Ever since he saw the sword, he had this feeling. In the end, he actually had to press it down. If he had arrived here in one piece, he didn't know how much effort he would have had to put in to realize this. He was really lucky. As Rinpoche thought about it, he couldn't support his body anymore and fell to the ground. His consciousness became more and more blurry, and he could return to reality at any time. Rumble. The sky was shaking, the earth was shaking, and everything in this world was shaking and collapsing. The sky was full of cracks and the earth was peeling off piece by piece. This world seemed to be floating in the air. Now that the layer supporting the world had been pierced, the world began to collapse and peel off. When this world peeled off to the end, it scattered like fragments, leaving only a boundless void. All of Rinpoche's senses were deprived. His sight, hearing, smell, touch, strength, pain, and even the feeling of the passage of time. Except for his slow thinking, everything else was gone. He floated in the darkness just like that. In the outside world, Rinpoche's body was also undergoing changes. The lungs corresponding to gold began to undergo an inexplicable change the moment he broke through. The impurities in his lungs were removed, and Rinpoche, who had lost consciousness, spat out mouthfuls of black mucus. These were the impurities that had been stuck in his lungs for so many years. They were stripped off and expelled from his body during this change. Chapter 697. Rinpoche was awakened by hunger. The strong sense of hunger was like a tide that stimulated his brain. His surroundings were dark, but he was lying on a familiar bed. The sound of heavy rain could be heard from outside the window. However, Rinpoche had no time to think about other things. Hungry. Rinpoche felt that his eyes had turned green. He quickly found a bag filled with candies from around the bed. He tore open the wrapper with trembling hands and threw the candies into the bag. Finally, he swallowed them without any hesitation. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. A bag of about 1.5 kilograms of candies was in his stomach. The burning sensation in his stomach didn't diminish at all, and his brain was still sending out signals that he needed to eat. Rinpoche flipped over and landed on the ground like a ghost. He staggered, stabilized his body with great difficulty, and hurriedly pushed open the door and ran out. When his gaze landed on Tian and Gun, who were hiding from the rain under the eaves, he felt as if he had seen delicious food. A large amount of saliva was secreted from his mouth before he swallowed it. Fortunately, although the 1.5 kilograms of candies didn't alleviate his hunger, it allowed him to retain his ability to think. Otherwise, if he had rushed out as soon as he woke up, he reckoned that he would only see a floor of bones when he woke up the next day. Rinpoche's figure floated into the rain, leaped over the wall, and headed straight for the imperial kitchen. Ever since he woke up, he had felt that his body was as light as a feather. Originally, he could only jump about 10 meters, but now he could easily jump 20 to 30 meters, which almost made him crash into a tree. However, he only pressed on the tree with one hand to slow himself down. He flipped his body up, landed on a branch, and dashed forward again. "Who's there?" A shout came from the darkness. Although Rinpoche couldn't see, he could sense that there were 2 very distinct auras in the darkness ahead. In the past, it was extremely difficult for Rinpoche to detect them. Now, he could easily sense that there were 2 people there and could even sense their approximate strength. Is this an earth wheel expert? Rinpoche thought to himself. He then said in a deep voice, "It's me, the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy." As soon as he spoke, he was slightly stunned. This voice didn't seem to belong to him. It was deeper than his own voice and it sounded a little hoarse and torn. "Sir Rin?" someone asked in the darkness. "It's me." Rinpoche jumped down from the tree and gradually saw the two guards in the dark. "Who are you?" Their expressions changed when they saw Rinpoche. The steel sabers in their hands slashed at him gracefully. "Rinpoche, can't you two recognize me?" Rinpoche retreated as he endured the hunger that never stopped. With a light leap he landed on the wall behind him. However, the steel sabers of the two men followed him like a shadow, even splitting the rain in the air. "What kind of demon is this? How dare you impersonate Sir Ren?" Rinpoche leaped and with a bang the entire wall was split apart by the two of them. If he had encountered such a situation in the past, he would probably have had to teleport back to Earth in an instant. However, even though the two of them were fast, he was able to grasp their movements in the dark and evade them. "I'm Rinpoche. Can't you recognize me?" Rinpoche frowned again. How could the Imperial Guards not recognize him? Even if you want to impersonate, you have to be more realistic. "Look at you, which part of you looks like Sir Ren?" Furthermore, if it was Sir Ren, he would have been killed by that slash just now, the duo shouted as they chased after him. Rinpoche was speechless. Following their shouts, people in other parts of the palace responded with long roars. As if a hornet's nest had been poked, figures appeared on the roofs and walls and quickly surrounded Rinpoche. Without saying a word, rays of sabers surged toward Rinpoche and joined in the strangulation. "Damn you." Rinpoche was about to die from anger. He was already starving to death, but he still had to be entangled by them. He had just broken through to the earth wheel level, yet he was already strangled by these guards. It was simply a joke. However, facing the rays of sabers around him, Rinpoche felt a great sense of danger and had goosebumps all over his body. He clearly felt that there was an opening around him, but his body couldn't keep up with his brain at all. He could only watch helplessly as the sabers in the rain sealed off all directions around him. It was as if he would be split in half in the next second. "Metal chain," Rinpoche shouted in his heart. If he didn't block them now, the Empress would be able to collect his corpse in a while. Furthermore, the metal chain often appeared. Even if those people couldn't recognize him, there would always be someone who could, right? As Rinpoche shouted in his heart, a chain popped out from the top of his head. When it realized that it was surrounded by steel knives, it was startled and straightened its body, just like how an animal would straighten its tail when it was frightened. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck down, and the metal chain suddenly became a lightning rod. Rinpoche, who was leaping in the air with the chain on his head, was struck solidly. F***ck your grandpa's. Rinpoche fell from the sky with smoke coming out of his mouth. He didn't expect that he would have such an unlucky day. After painstakingly attaining the earth wheel level, he woke up to be chased by guards and then struck by lightning. Rinpoche didn't know who to scold. He now understood the kind of bitter expert who thought that he was the best in the world after years of hard work, only to be smashed to death by a flying shoe as soon as he came out of seclusion. They were all people who had fallen from grace. Struck to death by lightning? It smells like it's cooked. The many guards who rushed over stopped their sabers and looked at each other. How unlucky was this person to be struck to death by lightning before they could do anything? However, this person was really courting death by sneaking into the palace. "Someone has invaded. Inform the commander to come." Also, he pretended to be Sir Rin just now and went to check on him, the two guards immediately said as they recalled an important matter. "This person isn't dead yet," someone said after checking Rinpoche's breath. "Watch him and wait for the commander to come." Xanja rushed over in a moment. Rain was dripping down her armor and her face was cold. Someone sneaked into the palace? How many people? Only one was found. However, this person pretended to be Sir Ren. "I'm afraid that he's in danger, so I've already sent someone to investigate. Pass down the order to search the entire palace to see if he has any accomplices. Commander, Sir Ren is missing," someone suddenly reported. "What?" Xanja was shocked. If Rinpoche was missing, it would be a big problem. The door to Sir Ren's room was open, but it seems that no one went in. There are no traces of water on the ground. With such heavy rain, it's impossible to sneak into Sir Ren's room without leaving any traces. It looks like Sir Ren left on his own. I followed the traces left by Sir Ren after he left the room. The rain was too heavy, so there were very few traces left. However, according to the direction, it should be here. As soon as he said that, everyone was instantly confused. But this person's voice, figure, and appearance aren't Sir Ren's. The two guards who were the first to arrive were dumbfounded. Everyone carefully sized up the person on the ground. The lightning strike just now had left only a few rags hanging on his body. His whole body was charred black and emitted the aroma of roasted meat. A metal chain mysteriously protruded from the top of Rinpoche's head. Xinja looked at this metal chain, and the coldness on her face instantly dissipated. Such a wretched metal chain, there was no one else. Chapter 698. Damn it, damn it, damn it. In the boundless darkness, all that was left in Rinpoche's mind was his resentment towards the group of simple-minded guards and that brilliant bolt of lightning. During this period, he would occasionally curse the metal chain and then continue to curse the group of guards and that bolt of lightning. He had just broken through to the earth wheel level and was struck by lightning before he could even have a bite of meat. Was there anyone more miserable than him? After cursing in the darkness for an unknown period of time, Rinpoche suddenly felt that the surrounding darkness was a little different. It was a very subtle difference. There seemed to be a trace of purple pulsating in the darkness. It was just that the trace of purple was too small and hidden in the darkness, so he didn't notice it. What is this? The new discovery in the endless darkness made Rinpoche suddenly raise his spirits and search for that trace of purple. For an unknown period of time, Rinpoche had been trying hard to find traces of that trace of purple. However, he only found it twice and both times were fleeting. This made him even more curious. However, at this moment he felt himself being pulled by something. Following which he felt dizzy. The feeling of hunger and pain all over his body surged into his mind again. Am I back? This thought emerged in Rinpoche's mind. The eyeballs under his eyelids moved, and he tried hard to open his eyes. He saw the Empress's cold and concerned face above him. When he turned his gaze again, he realized that he seemed to be in the Empress's bedroom. You are finally awake. The Empress heaved a sigh of relief. Following which she said softly, You are lucky. If it were someone else, they would have been in danger this time. It was dangerous enough for me, Rinpoche thought to himself. He was very conscious and could even feel the presence of 3 people in the hall. 2 of them were very weak, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan. The last one was at the earth wheel level, but he didn't know who it was. Your Majesty, Sir Ren should be fine. It's just that he has consumed too much energy and needs to replenish his body, an old voice said from the side. I understand, the Empress replied. Following which, the sound of that person's footsteps could be heard. Water, meat. Rinpoche's lips trembled. He was about to go crazy from hunger. Drink this first. The Empress got Hong Yuan to help him up and got Qing Yuan to feed him a bowl of black juice. Just as it entered his stomach through his esophagus, it turned into a warm current that spread throughout his body. What followed after was an even crazier and crazier sense of hunger. Meat. Meat. Rinpoche felt so hungry that he could eat an entire 4-corned cow. Although he used to think this way when he was hungry, he usually only managed to eat a tail. But this time he really felt that he could eat a cow. Inform the imperial kitchen, the Empress instructed. Following which, she stuffed a fruit into Rinpoche's hand and said, Eat it first. Rinpoche raised his hand and finished the fruit in 2 or 3 bites. When he was about to reach for another one, he suddenly froze. In the past, people used to describe people's skinny hands as chicken claws. But he felt like he was stretching out a chicken's claw. The skin was sticking to the bones and there was almost no flesh left. Only the blue veins were moving up and down on the back of his hand. He stretched out his other hand and did the same thing. Rinpoche suddenly remembered that the guard couldn't recognize him previously. What have I become now? Rinpoche asked with a strange look on his face. Hong Yuan, bring me the mirror, the Empress instructed faintly. Following which, Rinpoche saw in the mirror a skinny skeleton with almost no flesh under the skin. Rinpoche originally weighed 100 kilograms, but now he looked like he was only 25 to 30 kilograms. The loose clothes hung on his body as if they were wrapped in a piece of cloth. His exposed skin was full of cracks, making him look even more terrifying. Also, there was a trace of purple in his eyes. This is me. I didn't expect that your breakthrough this time would be so dangerous. You actually transformed a large amount of flesh and blood into essence and circulated it in your 5 viscera. If it was any worse, I'm afraid you would have become a dried corpse, the Empress said softly with a trace of lingering fear in her voice. If it wasn't for the fact that Rinpoche had eaten a lot of natural treasures, used the best medicinal herbs for cultivation, ate the best food and was in peak condition, he would have become a dried corpse during this breakthrough. However, you will be able to recover after you eat more, the Empress said again. Rinpoche nodded, grabbed a fruit and stuffed it into his mouth. After finishing all the fruits in the Empress's bedroom, Rinpoche didn't know if it was because of the effects of the drink or the fruits, but he felt a little more strength in his body. I can't wait for them to finish cooking. I'll go to the imperial kitchen. Rinpoche propped himself up and said. The Empress grabbed Rinpoche's collar and went to the entrance of the bedroom in a flash. After a while, they arrived at the imperial kitchen. The Empress put Rinpoche on the ground and said, "You're too light." Rinpoche didn't reply and staggered into the imperial kitchen. When he smelled the aroma of food being cooked, his eyes turned green. Amidst the cries of the imperial kitchen cooks, he picked up a piece of cooked meat and started gnawing on it. "Do what you need to do. Hurry up." The Empress followed behind Rinpoche and said to everyone, "Yes, Your Majesty." Everyone did what they needed to do. Rinpoche was like a hungry ghost that had been starving for thousands of years. He ate a piece of meat in a few bites and immediately grabbed another piece of meat. In no time he had finished the meat that the Empress had prepared. However, his hunger didn't seem to be alleviated at all. Rinpoche looked at the vegetables again. After eating a few mouthfuls he couldn't take it anymore. He picked up a piece of raw meat and started gnawing on it. When he had eaten more than half of the horned beef and jumping lamb in the imperial kitchen, he took the freshly prepared food and poured it into his mouth. He ate this meal from the time he woke up until the sky turned dark. The cooks in the imperial kitchen were so busy that they were drenched in sweat. They finished everything in the imperial kitchen and asked the imperial court to send a batch of meat over before Rinpoche was satisfied. Phew! Rinpoche heaved a long sigh of relief. The strength that he hadn't felt in a long time had finally returned. Furthermore, it was even stronger than before. Rinpoche felt that he could beat up the little Lolita now. At the same time, his body expanded from being a bag of bones to being inflated like a balloon. Although he hadn't reached his original size, he at least looked like a human instead of a skeleton wrapped in a layer of skin. The most important thing was that the crazy hunger was finally gone. I'm finally alive. Rinpoche patted his belly and sighed. Rinpoche ate for the whole day while the Empress sat by the side and waited for the whole day. During this period, she even sent someone to her bedroom to bring her manga over. The Empress raised her head and asked, "How do you feel now?" "Very good. I feel like I can smash a mountain." Rinpoche clenched his fists. His knuckles were cracking. The feeling of being full of strength was really great. Rinpoche looked down at his arm. It was covered in patches of dead skin that had been stretched open, revealing the new skin underneath. He casually tore a few times on his arm. The dead skin that was previously charred by the lightning fell off in large chunks, and the new skin underneath looked more tender than before. "It's good that you are fine. I'm also tired and will go back to rest." The Empress closed the manga, took a step forward and disappeared without a trace. Although the Empress didn't do anything, she had been waiting for Rinpoche to wake up and had been worried about him. Now that Rinpoche was fine, she could finally relax. Chapter 699. His strength was obviously much stronger than before. Rinpoche tested it with a heavy object in the room and found that it had increased by about a quarter. His hands now had about 1,600 kilograms of strength. Coupled with the strength of his legs and waist, Rinpoche felt that he could use a car as a training tool. As for his speed, it was the biggest change. Rinpoche always felt that his body was light as a feather, as if he could jump with a little force. Rinpoche exerted force with his feet outside the room and rushed out like an arrow. Bang! "Sir Ren." The guards outside the courtyard rushed in. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." Rinpoche rubbed his nose as the wall in front of him cracked. He thought back to the day when he had just broken through and was about to crash into a tree. His reaction at that time was much faster than it was now. It had to be said that people were forced to do what they could. When a person was extremely hungry, his body's potential could be unleashed. Rinpoche gently landed on the wall that was more than 3 meters high and landed on the opposite roof. In the blink of an eye, Rinpoche had covered a distance of tens of meters. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes before he landed on the roof and crushed 2 stone tiles on the way. Rinpoche estimated that it would only take him about 2 seconds to cover 100 meters. Previously, it would have taken him at least 5 seconds. This meant that his current speed was 2.5 times faster than before. He was even faster than the winged cavalry. The winged cavalry warriors hadn't just entered the Kismet heaven level. They had been there for decades, but Rinpoche was faster than them. Furthermore, he had just entered the earth wheel level and would probably be even faster in the future. In terms of strength, he was much weaker than the Kismet Heaven experts. The strength of an aboriginal Kismet Heaven expert was at least 1,000 kilograms, while the strength of the winged cavalry warriors was generally between 2,300 and 2,700 kilograms. Earth wheel experts were usually 1,500 kilograms. Rinpoche's 1,600 kilograms of strength was slightly stronger than that of an earth wheel expert but much weaker than an aboriginal expert of the same level. Another important change was that the qi in his body was much more obvious than before. Previously, it was just scattered puddles that could only be sensed by careful sensing. In the blink of an eye, it would dissipate everywhere in his body. Now it was like the Yangtze River flowing endlessly between his internal organs. From time to time, essence blood would transform into essence qi and join the circulation, and from time to time, essence qi would dissipate into his limbs. Although it wasn't that clear, he could still feel it. Moreover, when he started to jump, he could feel essence qi flowing into his legs. Rinpoche had a rough idea of the changes that had occurred after he entered the earth wheel level. Seeing that it was already late at night, he entered his room and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Rinpoche woke up and went to the Empress's quarters. On the way, he met two imperial guards who greeted him from afar and cupped their hands. "Sir Rin, we were rash that day and didn't recognize you. We apologize for offending you." "Forget it." Rinpoche waved his hand. "Not to mention these two people, even his own mother wouldn't be able to recognize him. The two of you are also doing your duty. The situation that day was special. You two can't be blamed. I knew Sir Rin wasn't a stingy person. I'll treat you to a drink some other day." After bidding farewell to the two of them, Rinpoche went to the Empress's quarters and saw that she was sitting in front of a mirror as she groomed her. "Have you rested enough?" the Empress asked softly upon seeing Rinpoche enter. "I'm fine now." Rinpoche smiled. "I've caused your Majesty to worry. Your martial arts are a little strange. Such a situation wouldn't occur when a man-wheel expert breaks through to the earth wheel level, so I didn't expect it." "Fortunately, nothing happened," the Empress said faintly. "Previously, I asked other practitioners about the situation of breaking through to the earth wheel level, and it's indeed different. However, others practice step by step and their bodies are full of qi and blood. Other people often practice for more than 10 years. During practice, they will naturally convert a small amount of blood essence into essence qi and slowly change their bodies. When breaking through, they don't need to consume so much qi and blood. However, I reached the sky in a single step. I first used medicinal herbs to nourish my body and used the 5 thoughts visualization to cultivate my internal organs from the inside out. I used more than a year to walk the path that others took more than 10 years to walk. Naturally, it's much more dangerous," Rinpoche said. He had already thought about the internal situation last night. "Well, it's good that you know. This martial art of yours was obtained from the treasury of the previous dynasty. Currently, no one knows the specifics. I'm afraid that there are many parts that aren't stated clearly, so you have to pay more attention. Fortunately, you were lucky enough to obtain the other volume of this martial art. Make more speculations to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. After all, you won't be so lucky every time," the Empress said faintly. "Eh." He responded softly and stood at the side, quietly watching the Empress dress up. The Empress was used to his gaze in the past, but this gaze made her feel a little different. She blushed and softly reprimanded, "What are you looking at?" Rinpoche pondered and said, "According to our customs, shouldn't I be asking you what's wrong?" The wooden box on the dressing table flew directly toward Rinpoche's head. Then it flew past him from 2 meters away. Rinpoche took a step back, reached out and grabbed the box. After opening it, he found that it contained lipstick from the Yun nation. Although he had bought a lot of lipstick on Earth, the Empress liked the fragrance of this lipstick more. "It smells so good." Rinpoche smiled after smelling it. The Empress raised her eyebrows and said, "You've become capable." Rinpoche looked at the Empress and smiled without saying anything. He had finally reached the earth wheel level. The Empress raised her eyebrows and blushed again. "Chase him out. He's disturbing me by standing there," the Empress said angrily. Qing Yuan stood at the side and winked at Rinpoche with a smile. "I'm waiting for your Majesty to have breakfast together." Rinpoche smiled, but he didn't stare at the Empress anymore. Otherwise, he would be the unlucky one if she became too embarrassed. After accompanying the Empress for breakfast, Rinpoche hurried to the academy. When he came out of the palace, he happened to meet people who were waiting outside for the morning court session. The court session in Dayo didn't start at 5 a.m. like in ancient China, but at 7 a.m. Rinpoche went to the academy at the same time as the court session, and there were already many people waiting outside the palace. Many people were stunned to see Rinpoche. With so many people in the court, it was impossible for them not to see the change in Rinpoche's cultivation level. Sir Rin has actually improved. This is really rare. Tonight I'll celebrate with you at Yenyun restaurant. As soon as he saw Rinpoche, Tong Jingye welcomed him with a hearty laugh and slapped him with his palm the size of a cattail leaf fan. For Tong Jingye, there was nothing that couldn't be solved by a trip to a brothel. If there was, he would go there twice. In the face of Tong Jingye's slap, even though Rinpoche wanted to run away, he didn't have the slightest strength to resist Tong Jingye's palm. In his eyes, Tong Jingye's palm, which was as big as a cattail leaf fan, seemed to cover the sky. No matter where he tried to retreat, the palm would land on his shoulder. 2 slaps nailed Rinpoche to the ground. It's much sturdier than before. Tong Jingye sighed and clicked his tongue. Sir Tong, you can't invite Sir Rin to Yenyun restaurant this time. Shi Qing took a few steps forward and smiled. What's wrong? Tong Jingye was still a little respectful toward Shi Qing, so he turned his body to face him and asked. Since Sir Rin has already advanced to the earth wheel level, it's time to discuss Her Majesty's marriage. Shi Qing stroked his beard and smiled. Back then, Her Majesty was stubborn and everyone wasn't optimistic. However, over the past year, Rinpoche had demonstrated his ability and reached the earth wheel level half a year earlier than expected. This showed that Rinpoche still had a certain level of talent and could improve further in the future. Tong Jingye was happy to see this happen. Rinpoche pulled himself out of the ground, landed behind Shi Qing in a flash and said, I won't disturb you anymore. I'll take my leave now. After saying this, he turned around and ran away to avoid being slapped into the ground again. Comrade Shi Qing is a good comrade. Rinpoche sighed in his heart as he ran. Shi Qing was still the most reliable person at critical moments. After Rinpoche left, everyone started whispering to each other. They didn't expect Rinpoche to break through to the earth wheel level so quickly, which was much faster than everyone expected. Most importantly, it seemed like Her Majesty's marriage would be put on the agenda. Chapter 700. His Majesty has arrived. In fact, even if no one announced it, everyone in the hall could completely sense that the Empress had arrived. Under everyone's gaze, the Empress walked across the hall and sat on the golden throne at the highest end. She slowly said, I have something to report. Following the Empress's voice, the hall was silent for a few seconds. Everyone looked at each other but no one spoke. If there's nothing else, let's end the court session, the Empress said as she swept her gaze across the crowd. Tong Jingye stepped forward and said, I have something to report. The recent heavy rain has caused the dolomite mine to collapse in many places, and more than 70 people have been killed or injured. Prisoners of war? The Empress asked. Yes. Tong Jingye answered. The Empress felt a little strange. Why did he bring this matter up to the imperial court? Although Rinpoche made the prisoners of war sound very important, in the hearts of everyone, the death of dozens of prisoners of war was as natural as rain today. After all, there were so many prisoners of war and there were bound to be some who died of illness every day. Go back and deal with it yourself, the Empress replied casually. Who else has anything to report? The Water Empress looked around and said, If there's nothing else, the court is dismissed. Your Majesty, I also have something to report. Gui Hong had no choice but to step forward under Tong Jingye's threatening gaze. The Empress furrowed her eyebrows. When she asked just now, no one spoke. When she said that the court session was over, all these people jumped out one by one. The sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and potatoes provided by Principal Ren are suitable for growing in Tianjing Basin. I would like to introduce these crops to Tianjing Basin to replace the wetland rice that is currently being grown in Tianjing Basin. After all, the yield of wetland rice was very low, and its value was not high. Most of the crops in Tianjing Basin are planted with this type of crop. If they are changed to sweet potatoes and other crops, the output can be increased by at least 5 times. Gui Hong reported. Proof. The Empress nodded. Is there anyone else? The Empress looked around again and raised her eyebrows when she saw that everyone looked as though their souls had left their bodies. When Shi Qing, who was standing at the forefront, saw this, he quickly took a few steps forward and cupped his hands in salute. Your Majesty, I have something to report. Speak. I met Sir Ren just now. He has just broken through to the earth wheel level, Shi Qing said. Indeed. The Empress immediately had a premonition that made her feel uneasy. Her Majesty and Sir Ren are in love with each other. Previously, it was only because Sir Ren's cultivation level was too low that Her Majesty was unable to give birth to an heir. Now that Sir Ren has broken through to the earth wheel level, it's time for Her Majesty's wedding, Shi Qing said slowly. The Empress felt as if she had been struck by lightning, and her whole body froze. Although she was already mentally prepared and liked Rinpoche very much, the mention of marriage made her feel like, I just got up this morning and had nothing to do, so I came to attend court. Now you want to talk to me about marriage? I haven't even brushed my teeth. The feeling of being unable to defend against an arrow to the knee. Her gaze swept across the crowd and everyone lifted their heads to stare at her. The Water Empress felt that she had not been so nervous in a long time. She felt as if there was a huge elephant jumping around in her chest. In an instant, the Empress blushed from her neck to her ears. This matter, we'll discuss it later. The Water Empress suppressed her emotions and tried her best to speak slowly. She felt that she was not ready yet. Could it be that Her Majesty is dissatisfied with Sir Ren? Do you want to find another husband? Shi Qing's wrinkled face revealed his white teeth. That's not it. The Empress waved her hand and her heart beat even faster. Your Majesty's talent is unparalleled, and your cultivation level is increasing day by day. However, it isn't difficult to find a man who can have a child with you. Shi Qing laughed. However, if Sir Ren makes another breakthrough, he may not be able to keep up with your Majesty's pace. Even if he can keep up, who knows how long it will be before he can. If your Majesty feels that there is nothing wrong with Sir Ren, please settle the marriage as soon as possible so that I and the others can rest assured. In the future, when your Majesty gives birth to a child, there will be nothing to worry about. Please arrange it as soon as possible, Your Majesty. Qin Xuan, Tu Wan, and the others stepped forward. Everyone could see that the Empress liked Rinpoche very much. Since that was the case, it was better to settle the marriage as soon as possible so that the Empress could give birth to a child. This was also a good thing. The Empress was already a little embarrassed and nervous, but when she saw everyone speaking up, she immediately became angry and asked, Are you forcing me? As she spoke, she raised her eyebrows, and an ominous glint flashed in her eyes. We just hope that your Majesty's marriage can be settled as soon as possible so that we can rest assured, everyone said. Forget it. You can make the arrangements and report to me later. The Empress raised her eyebrows and said in a low voice. After that, he stood up and walked out of the main hall. Not long after, his face turned red and steam began to rise from his head. White steam rose up to a height of 10 feet. From afar he looked like a moving human-shaped chimney. Thinking that she was actually going to marry that guy, the Empress felt that her brain was about to overload and stop working. After the Empress escaped, everyone looked at each other and smiled. Even Tong Xinye and Qin Xuan, who were usually at odds with each other, didn't pick on each other. It could be said that everyone had watched the Empress grow up. Even if the Empress's identity was disregarded, an event like the wedding of the Empress was extremely important to them. Dayo has not been established for a long time, and your Majesty is the only woman. There is really no precedent. How is this marriage going to be arranged? Is it going to be arranged according to the customs of Grand Xia or according to our ancient race's customs? Qin Xuan had a strange expression on his face. Of course we'll follow the ancient race's rules. Zhui Yin, the Minister of Justice, grinned. Then, everyone's expression turned strange. According to the Aboriginals' marriage arrangements, the parents had to go to the Aboriginals' house to discuss the marriage. No one knew where the old emperor had gone, and no one had heard of Rinpoche's parents. This was easy to arrange. Then he would send over a number of prey. This would depend on the strength of the man. The stronger the prey, the stronger the man, and the more respect he would have. The problem was the beating of the bride. Yes, a kiss. The woman's family had to send out experts to block the way, and the man had to fight his way up, and in the end he had to defeat the woman herself. Of course, after the betrothal, the bride's family would send people to stop them. This was mainly to show off their strength. Simply put, it was to show off their muscle so that they wouldn't be bullied in the future. As long as the male side displayed his strength, it would be fine. Usually they would exchange 3 to 10 moves depending on the situation at the time. As for getting past the girl herself, if they were in love with each other, the girl would go easy on him. However, with Rinpoche's small physique, even if he went easy on them, who could he beat? Even if he went easy on them, he couldn't beat them. He would fall to the ground with just one finger. After all, the Aboriginals respected the strong, and it was rare for a woman to find a husband who was weaker than her. Even if he was slightly weaker, the difference wouldn't be too big, and the ceremony would be more or less acceptable. However, the Empress found such a weak husband, which was rare among the Aboriginals. Even if she wanted to go easy on him, it would be difficult. Needless to say, there would definitely be a few officials from the court blocking the way, most likely Hong Wu. Then what? Rinpoche stretched out his finger and Hong Wu would fall to the ground? Even if Hong Wu was too strong, Tong Jinye and the others wouldn't be able to do it. These people still had a sense of shame. Even if they were acting, they couldn't act so fake. Not to mention the Empress herself. He wouldn't be able to beat her even if her hands and feet were tied up. If they followed the customs of the Aboriginals, how would they beat the bride? Why don't we follow the customs of Great Xia? Tuan suggested. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for our Aboriginal Empress to marry according to the customs of Great Xia. If word gets out, we will be ridiculed. Someone immediately objected. Everyone nodded. They didn't even need to think about the customs of Great Xia. Even though Her Majesty had agreed, it was difficult for everyone to arrange the wedding. After all, there was no precedent. Furthermore, Rinpoche was too weak. Why don't we discuss this matter later and set the date of the wedding first? Xian Hua, the Minister of Rights, frowned. Should we inform the General-in-Chief who supports the nation? Someone else asked. After all, Hong Wu and the Empress had a very good relationship. Even though they weren't like father and daughter, they were close. How could they not let Hong Wu know about this? In that case, use the radio to contact Hong Wu first. Everyone else, go back and think about how to arrange the wedding and see if there are any good ideas. Shi Qing said. Chapter 701. His Majesty's Marriage. Hong Wu thought for a while after hearing the content from the radio. I will return as soon as possible. Madam Hong, this matter is not urgent. The matters at the front lines are more urgent. The soldiers of Great Xia were stationed at the front line. If Sir Hong returned, what would happen to the 30,000 soldiers and hundreds of thousands of civilians? Just leave these matters to us. Right now, the main thing is that we haven't set a date for the wedding yet. Shi Qing said in a deep voice. Naturally, we have to kill Great Xia first. Initially, I wanted to let them wear down some of their soldiers. Don't worry, Great Elder, I know what I'm doing. As for the wedding date, I think I need to think about it carefully. Hong Wu strode out of the room after he finished speaking. Bring me my saber. Hong Wu shouted as he walked out of the door. My lord? Someone revealed a puzzled expression. However, someone quickly ran to Hong Wu's side with a long-handled broadsword. Hong Wu stretched out his hand and took it. He raised the long saber to the sky and swung it down. The house in front of Hong Wu was instantly split into two. Hong Wu threw the saber to the guard and said, Go and check the flashbangs. There must not be any mistakes. Also, get someone to watch the weather and inform me at any time. Yes. From today onwards, when the battalions are defending the city during the day, the time that each battalion spends guarding the city will be reduced to 6 hours. The rest of the time, you are to recuperate and build up your strength, awaiting my orders. My lord, aren't you being too hasty? The deputy general beside him immediately stepped forward and asked. He instantly understood the meaning behind Hong Wu's order. If that's what you think, then Great Xia will naturally think the same. No matter what, they wouldn't have thought that I would attack. At night, they would use flash grenades to launch a surprise attack. Then they would harass, divide, and strangle them. Firstly, the opponent was caught off guard, and secondly, he was blinded by the flash grenade. In his panic, he was like a piece of meat on a chopping board. I still don't understand why you suddenly made such a decision. If that's the case, the other party will retreat back to Tiesua Pass when they see that the situation is not good. The deputy general was puzzled. If they only had the original 20,000 soldiers, it would be good if they could defend the city. Fortunately, another 10,000 soldiers were transferred over. Although they were new soldiers, the ordinary aboriginals had considerable fighting strength. These new soldiers were recruited from the villages in the 60,000 mountains. This way, the Protectorate of the North would have a little more ability to counterattack. It was only when 20,000 stun grenades were delivered from the rear that Hong Wu finally had the ability to keep the Great Xia soldiers here. However, 30,000 soldiers were still not enough to keep the 500,000 soldiers of Great Xia here. After all, Ping City was so close to Tiesua Pass that it would take less than a day's journey to get there. Even if the surprise attack was successful, the enemy would naturally retreat after suffering a great defeat. Even if all 30,000 troops were to attack and kill their way through, at least half of the remaining 430,000 troops would be able to retreat back to Tiesua Pass. According to the original plan, they would first whittle down a third of the enemy's forces at the foot of the city, then break through the enemy's main camp in one fell swoop. After that, they would kill their way through. At most, the enemy would have 50 to 80,000 soldiers left to retreat. Hong Wu frowned slightly, his heart was not calm. If the Empress's marriage didn't happen, he would naturally follow the original plan. However, he couldn't wait any longer. Even though he could use the radio station to communicate, he still wanted to make a trip back to Lan City. He said solemnly, "You go ahead and make the arrangements. I have my own arrangements." After sending the deputy away, Hong Wu went to the hall and looked at the map on the table in silence. He then drew a circle around Tiesua Pass and the other two border passes of Great Xia. Ren Baqian's breakthrough to the Earth Wheel level caused quite a stir in the academy. They were still guessing what had happened when Ren Baqian didn't come to class for the past 2 days. They didn't expect him to break through secretly. Even though an Earth Wheel expert wasn't considered an expert, it took Ren Baqian less than 2 years to go from an ordinary person to an Earth Wheel expert. This speed made those students rather envious and jealous. Of course, Tong Lan was the most unhappy one. She felt that there wouldn't be many opportunities for her to take revenge while practicing martial arts. At least it wouldn't be as easy as before. Ren Baqian had just broken through. She should put more effort into practicing martial arts next time. If Ren Baqian knew what Tong Lan was thinking, he would definitely feel that he had given the students too little homework. They probably hadn't seen what it meant to have a sea of homework and questions. However, Ren Baqian was in a good mood. After suffering for so many years, he was finally going to become a wife. On the way to the Empress's quarters, he saw someone who shouldn't be there coming out of the Empress's quarters. This made him wonder if his eyes were playing tricks on him. It was Lin Xiaola, who had delicate features, carried a pair of A's, and spent 24 hours a day eating, sleeping and drooling. Ren Baqian had always equated her with a pig. The only difference was that she could fight better than a pig. After returning from Tianjing Basin, he hadn't seen Lin Xiaola anywhere else other than when he went to Qingxin Palace Hall to see her snoring away. He didn't know which direction the sun rose from today, but Lin Xiaola actually came out from Qingxin Palace Hall. Sniff. When Lin Xiaola saw him, she jumped to his side and sniffed. Then, she placed her hand on the back of his waist and moved downward again and again. She pulled the bag of sweets that was hanging on his waist and beamed with joy. Lin Xiaola's eyes lit up. "Why did you come out?" Ren Baqian didn't care about the bag of sweets and felt that it was strange. Grandma wants to see Her Majesty, but she can't come out. Lin Xiaola happily grabbed a piece of chocolate from the bag, skillfully peeled it, and threw it into her mouth. Then her face twitched. "What's this taste? Why is it so disgusting?" Lin Xiaola spat a few mouthfuls of saliva and looked lifeless. Ren Baqian glanced at it and saw that it was indeed dark chocolate with 90% cocoa content. He had to admit that this thing was really disgusting. To describe it, it was similar to drinking Chinese medicine without rock sugar. That day when he was buying sweets at the supermarket, he accidentally caught it and mixed it with the sweets. Even the Empress fell for it once. "Librarian Lin can't come out?" Ren Baqian was curious about the other sentence that Lin Xiaola said. "Grandma is afraid of light. She never comes out during the day," Lin Xiaola said with a bitter face. She felt that her tongue was full of bitterness, and she only felt better after throwing a few pieces of sweets into her mouth. Then she beamed with joy. He had to admit that Lin Xiaola was a person who was easily satisfied. There's such a thing. Ren Baqian was slightly surprised as this was the first time he heard of it. It's been so many years. In any case, I have never seen Grandma come out. Lin Xiaola muttered, then waved at Ren Baqian and said, "Grandma looking for Her Majesty has something to do with you. You will know when the time comes. Let's go." Something to do with me? Could it be related to my martial arts? Ren Baqian thought for a while and then went to see the Empress. She was sitting on the couch in a daze. Her eyes weren't focused and no one knew what she was thinking. "Your Majesty?" "Ah." The Empress trembled when she heard his voice as if she was shocked. "What are you thinking about, Your Majesty?" Ren Baqian asked with a smile. "Just a small matter." The Empress's gaze drifted away, and it was obvious that she didn't mean it. She then calmed herself down, sat upright and said with a serious face, "I have something important to tell you." "Please speak, Your Majesty," Ren Baqian said. The Empress looked at Ren Baqian with a serious face. Then, her mind was in chaos and her head began to emit hot air. It was like steam rising more than 3 meters high. The Empress looked away and said, "It's nothing. Your Majesty, this move must be the legendary gathering of 3 flowers and 5 energies toward one's origin. It's really an eye-opener for me." Rinpoche exclaimed. The Empress blushed from her neck to her ears. "Is there really nothing else, Your Majesty?" Rinpoche looked at the Empress's attitude and asked with a smile. "There's nothing else." The Empress tried to calm her voice. "Really?" Chapter 702. Your Majesty, you have been brushing your teeth for almost an hour. Isn't it time to go to Qingshin Palace Hall? What exactly do you want to do there? Rinpoche leaned against the door and looked at the Empress speechlessly. 6 toothbrushes were broken in less than an hour. What did the toothbrush do wrong? If it were someone else, their gums would have been ground out. The Empress paused for a while, threw the toothbrush to Qing Yuan and walked out. "Let's go. What's on your mind today, Your Majesty?" Rinpoche asked as he followed behind the Empress. "Nothing, I'm fine," the Empress replied without turning her head. Rinpoche smiled. He knew why the Empress lost her composure today, and it was rather amusing to see her like this. When they entered the courtyard of Qingshin Palace Hall, they saw Lin Xiaola sprawled on the ground, drooling as she slept. She didn't care about the strong sunlight shining on her body, and she was still clutching the bag of sweets tightly. Cough. Rinpoche coughed dryly, and Lin Xiaola immediately jumped up from the ground. "Your Majesty." Lin Xiaola wiped her saliva, looked down at the bag of sweets in her hand, and then looked at the person in front of her. She hesitated for a while and reluctantly handed the bag over. The Empress glanced at it and said, "Keep it." She couldn't be more familiar with that bag and she knew what was inside without taking it. Lin Xiaola immediately stuffed the bag of sweets into her arms and led the way. "You guys wait outside." The Empress turned to Qing Yuan, Hong Yuan, and the guards who followed her. "Yes. Follow me in." The Empress glanced at Rinpoche. The 3 of them entered Qingshin Palace Hall and went straight to the 2nd floor. At the top of the stairs, they heard violent coughing sounds. The 2nd floor was still as dark as ever. "Your Majesty, I pay my respects to you." Supervisor Lin stood at the top of the stairs and greeted the Empress. "You don't have to be so polite." The Empress waved her hand. "You must have something to say to me." "Allow me to see Principal Ren's condition first," Supervisor Lin said. The Empress nodded slightly, and Rinpoche stepped forward and stood in front of Supervisor Lin. Supervisor Lin sized Rinpoche up and stretched out her withered palm to grab his shoulder. Rinpoche didn't dodge and let her grab his shoulder. However, Supervisor Lin's grip on Rinpoche's shoulder was unexpectedly strong. Her fingers seemed to have dug halfway into Rinpoche's shoulder, causing him to feel a stinging pain. Following which, Supervisor Lin pressed on Rinpoche's spine a few more times before taking a few steps back and saying, "In theory, Sir Ren and Her Majesty can have children." "But," Rinpoche and the Empress frowned. "No matter who you are, you don't like to hear but, because it means that there are other things to say later. However, I'm afraid that Sir Ren's physical strength can't withstand Her Majesty's strength. Her Majesty can injure Sir Ren unintentionally. I'm sure both of you are aware of this," Librarian Lin continued. On the spot, Rinpoche wanted to say, "Motherf asterisk Kerr." Supervisor Lin's words didn't sound right. Faced with such blatant words, the Empress's face looked as if it was stained with blood. Steam was coming out of her head again. "This is what I expected, which is why I invited Her Majesty and Sir Ren here," Librarian Lin said unhurriedly. Rinpoche stepped forward and said, "Librarian Lin, please speak your mind." Looking at the Empress's steaming appearance, he didn't think that she would open her mouth at this moment. Furthermore, what Librarian Lin said was what he had been considering. Originally, he thought that he could solve the problem with the unlocking posture, but now it seemed like there was a better way. There's a manual called Yang Boosting Technique in Qingshin Palace Hall. After practicing it, blood and qi will directly penetrate the surface of the body and greatly increase the strength of the body. This technique is a secret technique passed down by the Hao Nation's royal family, and the successive emperors of the Hao Nation have been practicing it since childhood. In the past, Sir Ren didn't have enough primordial yang energy. If he were to forcefully practice it, I'm afraid that he would exhaust his blood essence. Now that he has broken through to the so-called Earth Wheel level, he can start practicing this technique, Librarian Lin said. "How long does it take to practice this technique?" Rinpoche asked curiously. The effect can be seen in as little as 3 months. However, it isn't easy to practice this technique. This technique is divided into 2 types, the main one and the supplementary one. Back then, when the men of the Han nation's imperial family practiced this technique, they would choose 18 talented young girls to practice together as human furnaces to supplement the yang with yin. They would form a group of 6 to deal with the 3 levels of ordinary people, man wheel and earth wheel. When these young girls reached a certain level of cultivation in the supplementary technique, they would choose the one with the lowest level to be used as a human furnace while the rest would continue to practice. Every time the person who practiced the main technique reached a new level, they would need the corresponding young girls who practiced the supplementary technique as human furnaces. After the remaining 12 young girls reached the man wheel level, the 6 with the slowest cultivation would be kept as human furnaces. After the rest broke through to the earth wheel level, they would be used as human furnaces for the person who practiced the main technique. It is said that after reaching the spirit wheel level, a spirit wheel human furnace is still needed. However, which spirit wheel expert would dare to use them as human furnaces? Librarian Lin said unhurriedly. The content of her words made Rinpoche and the Empress's expressions change. However, neither of them said anything and allowed the old woman in front of them to continue speaking. The main point of this technique is to supplement the yang with yin and assist the growth of yang. If slight changes are made, there will be a shortcut. There is a price to pay for this shortcut, which is that one can only reach the beginner level of this technique. After improving one's physical body to a certain level, one can't go any further. What is needed is the primordial yin of 6 earth wheel level women and their cultivation. Rinpoche grinned. This technique sounded like it belonged to the coquettish and cheap type. It was indeed different from the proper technique that he practiced. However, he decided to forget about this technique. This old woman definitely had ill intentions when she mentioned it. The Empress was silent for a while and said in a deep voice, "I understand. I will get someone to capture 6 people from the Yun nation who meet the criteria. Is there enough time?" "If it's within 3 months, then there's enough time," Minister Lin said. "Your Majesty, I don't need to practice this technique. I can find another external technique to practice." Rinpoche was surprised. "Shut up. Don't be anxious. I haven't finished speaking. Although this technique has been modified, the main and supplementary techniques haven't changed. The other party must practice the supplementary techniques. If the person we capture refuses to practice the supplementary techniques, it will be useless. Find someone who is concerned about the sect. Put a knife to their neck, and they will naturally be willing," the Empress said with a cold face. Rinpoche was touched. Even he felt that this technique was a little excessive, let alone the Empress. Even though the veins on the Empress's neck were about to pop out, she still made such a choice. How could he not be touched by her decision given her status? "Your Majesty, I will never practice this technique. I will find another external technique," Rinpoche said in a deep voice. "You are not willing?" The Empress glared at him with a cold face. "After spending so much time with your Majesty, I'm afraid that seeing other women is like seeing a skeleton. Your Majesty, do you think that I can use a skeleton as a cultivation vessel?" Rinpoche gave the Empress a smile that he felt was very kind. "Then is it my fault? Should I say sorry?" The Empress was obviously very jealous, but she had to pretend to be magnanimous when it concerned Rinpoche. She was very angry. The Empress definitely wasn't the type to smile even when she was angry. Her face immediately turned cold. Chapter 703. Your Majesty and Sir Ren, don't be anxious. I'm not done yet. Supervisor Lin continued to speak unhurriedly. Actually, this technique has been modified by this old woman. There are 2 cultivation methods. One is the human cauldron technique that this old woman just mentioned. Another way is to borrow the earthine spring in the 60,000 mountains. Rinpoche and the Empress immediately stared at Supervisor Lin with murderous eyes. "Why didn't you say so earlier that there was another way? Are you teasing us on purpose?" If Rinpoche couldn't wait to agree just now, or if the Empress didn't agree, it would probably leave a knot in their hearts. Fortunately, the Empress was magnanimous and Rinpoche knew what to do. Both of them were touched. In addition, the Empress was extremely jealous. That old bastard was really not a good person. Rinpoche immediately labeled Supervisor Lin in his mind. However, this method is extremely dangerous. The earthine spring is extremely special. Rumor has it that this earthine spring connects the 2 realms of life and death, but no one knows if this is true or not. However, the earthine spring was extremely dangerous. Even if an ordinary person touched it, they would be disturbed by the dark illusions, not to mention using it to cultivate. It's fine if you have a strong will. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to endure the attacks of the illusions. If you go down, you won't be able to come back up. Rinpoche furrowed his eyebrows and asked, Librarian Lin, are there no other ways to train the physical body? This is the shortest time. The other techniques would take months and years to show their effects. I'm afraid it's too late. Only this kind of shortcut can speed things up. Supervisor Lin squeezed out a smile on her wizened old face. Let's use the second method then, Rinpoche said. After practicing the Rui visualization, he had some confidence in his willpower. What kind of ghost attacks could compare to the various kinds of life and death experiences in the 5 visions? Furthermore, he could send the spring water back to Earth for testing. Why did he have to let the Empress have such a huge hold on him? What if the Empress wanted to settle the score with him one day? Wouldn't he be out of luck then? Use the first method, the Empress said. Your Majesty. Rinpoche wanted to speak. I have the final say, the Empress interrupted him. Your Majesty. What if I can't get hard when I see them? Rinpoche spread his hands. The Empress's forehead began to emit steam, and the veins on her neck were throbbing. She slapped Rinpoche's body. Bang! There's a hole in the wall. Only the Empress, Librarian Lin and Lin Xiaola were left in Qingxin Palace Hall. Now that it's quiet, let's use the first method, the Empress said coldly as if a layer of ice had been scraped off her face. He had made up his mind that he would definitely find 6 women for Rinpoche that would make him feel so miserable that he would rather die the moment he saw them. He couldn't possibly let Rinpoche off easy. Rinpoche felt dizzy and disoriented. He flew a long distance in the air before smashing through a roof and falling. Boom. My waist is about to break. Rinpoche gasped for a long time and then saw someone looking at him from a distance. He was looking at himself in the barrel. Are you taking a bath? Rinpoche squeezed out a good-natured smile. Yes. Xanja sat in the bucket with a cold expression. Her shoulders and neck were exposed outside the bucket, and her hair was completely disheveled. Her Majesty threw me here. Rinpoche said seriously after thinking for a while. He really couldn't take the blame for this, nor could he afford to. I guessed it. Xanja continued to look at him coldly. You live in the palace? I didn't know about it before. Rinpoche lay on the ground and looked around. The decorations were very simple and crude, and there was even a knife hanging on the wall. However, the small ornaments in the room looked quite cute, and he felt that this might be Xanja's residence. I have a residence in the city, but I rest here most of the time. Her Majesty gave me special permission to do so. Since Rinpoche asked, Xanja answered truthfully. From her expression, one couldn't tell what she was thinking. Oh. Rinpoche nodded. You're not leaving? Xanja asked coldly when she saw that Rinpoche wasn't going to get up. My waist is about to break. I need to rest for a while. Rinpoche gasped. I'm done bathing. I'm leaving. After Xanja finished speaking, she stood up from the bucket with the sound of water splashing. She took a step out of the bucket, picked up a piece of cloth from the side, and wiped her body clean. Then she put on her vest, safety pants and armor. Rinpoche stared blankly at that pair of D's jumping, and her perky buttocks, and other things that shouldn't be seen. After all, no one wore clothes when they bathed at home. Xanja didn't try to hide her actions. She didn't seem to understand these things. Don't touch the things in the room, Xanja said to Rinpoche after putting on the armor. Got it? Take care. Rinpoche responded obediently and watched as Xanja left the room. Rinpoche lay on the ground, looked at the big hole in the ceiling beam, smelled the lingering fragrance in the air and sighed. Such is life. After lying on the ground for a long time, he finally got up with his hands on his waist and strolled around the room. His main focus was on the wooden ornaments, a black gentleman and 2 monkeys. They looked very lifelike and he didn't expect Xanja to like them. Then he strolled to the Empress's palace, where she was already waiting. Your Majesty, I remember you saying that you wanted to go back and see my mother's grave, Rinpoche said. I should indeed make a trip there. The Empress's face was cold and she didn't look too happy. The word unhappy was written all over her face. I'll accompany your Majesty and take a look at the Earthine spring. If possible, I still want to give it a try. With your Majesty by my side, you should be able to pull me out if something goes wrong, right? If it doesn't work, we can use another method and make 2 preparations, Rinpoche said. He really didn't want the Empress to arrange this. Not only would the Empress be unhappy, but he would also get into trouble. The Empress was stunned. She didn't expect Rinpoche to bring this up. However, Rinpoche's words make sense. She doesn't know what's going on with the earthine spring, so it's good to go and take a look. At the thought of this, the Empress's face relaxed a lot. Then she hesitated for a while and said seriously, "When I chose you as my husband, I decided that you had to reach the earth wheel level. Now that you have reached that level, everyone in the imperial court has to make preparations. I really want to visit my mother's grave before that. After all, my father has been missing for a long time, and only my mother is still there. No matter what, you have to come with me. It's good to take a look at the earthine spring. According to Librarian Lin, if you succeed in practicing with the earthine spring, the effect will be better than using a human cauldron. However, if it doesn't work out, you will have to use a human cauldron to practice." "What do you want, Your Majesty?" Rinpoche asked. The Empress was silent for a while before saying, "Of course, I don't want that. In the past, I was used to living in the palace and never felt that there was anything wrong. With you, the excitement has passed. Now, I'm afraid of being lonely and afraid that something will happen to you. I want you to accompany me, be happy with me, be sad with me, watch the moon with me, drink with me." The Empress's sudden reveal of her true feelings made Rinpoche's heart warm up. He wanted to accompany the Empress like this until the end, just like what he said before. "When I'm really unhappy, I can still hit you and be happy." "Your Majesty, you don't have to say this," Rinpoche said seriously. The Empress suddenly smiled and swept away the coldness on her body. She picked up the wine pot from the side of the couch and poured 2 cups of wine. "One for me, one for you." After finishing her sentence, she drank the wine in one gulp and poured another cup. "Therefore you can go and take a look at the earthine spring. If it doesn't work, you will have to use a human cauldron. Don't worry, I will find you 6 of the ugliest and oldest ones. This way I won't mind." "Your Majesty, you don't have to say that." Rinpoche shuddered at the thought of the 6 older sister phone. Chapter 704. In any case, everything could only be decided after seeing the Een spring in the 60,000 mountains. Whatever the Empress decided, he would let her decide. In any case, Rinpoche was determined to train at the earthine spring in the 60,000 mountains. For the next few days, apart from attending classes, Rinpoche focused on training. After this breakthrough, his body had changed a lot. Both his strength and speed had been greatly improved, and he wouldn't be able to control his body if he didn't train. It was like a child holding a 50-kilogram broadsword. A broadsword was very lethal, but it was useless if one couldn't control it. Instead, it would be a burden. This was Rinpoche's situation. After training for 3 days, Rinpoche felt that he had improved his control over his body. He asked the Empress to call Tonglan to the palace to spar with him. The Empress was surprised by Rinpoche's request. This was the first time that he had taken the initiative to spar with Tonglan without being forced. "How rare. It's not like you at all," the Empress said frankly. "Your Majesty, you are looking down on me." Rinpoche laughed. "After all, I can improve the fastest in high-intensity sparring. Sometimes I recall the day when I woke up and went crazy from hunger. On the way to the imperial kitchen, I encountered 2 guards, but I was able to dodge them with ease. However, after I woke up, that feeling disappeared and I couldn't even control my body properly." "What do you think is the reason?" the Empress looked at him and asked. Rinpoche pondered for a while and said, "Perhaps I'm the kind of person who becomes stronger when facing strong opponents? Only under pressure can I unleash my small universe? Originally, this talent was concealed, but it was awakened after I broke through to the earth wheel level." The Empress looked at him blankly. She was shocked by his words. After a while, she said, "I roughly know what's going on with you. You are indeed worthy of being called Your Majesty. Even I couldn't detect it, but you detected it so quickly." Rinpoche was delighted to hear this. The talent that he had hidden for so many years was finally going to be unleashed. "I did detect it." The Empress nodded. "You did detect it. You actually became arrogant. You actually dared to take the initiative to spar with Tonglan. You could even unleash your small universe." That afternoon, Rinpoche wore Li Ning's shorts and stood on the court. Opposite him was the little Lolita, Tonglan, who was dressed in white. She looked up at him with a mischievous expression. On the other hand, the Empress was sitting on a chair, eating fruits and watching anime. Behind her were Qing Yuan and Hong Luan. One of them was holding an umbrella while the other was preparing an ice basin and using a fan to blow cold air onto the Empress's body. Rinpoche felt a little excited. After being beaten up for so long, he could finally display his strength. With his extraordinary speed, he felt that he had a high chance of winning this time. He would definitely give the little loli a surprise. He could also improve his control over his body through battling with her. It was really several things in one go. Let me play some background music first. Rinpoche turned to the side and made a selection on the laptop. Immediately, the external interface started playing impassioned music. After that, Rinpoche realized that the little Lolita was even more excited than him when listening to this epic electronic music. Her little head was nodding bit by bit. "You can relax. Anyway, I've never won before," Rinpoche said. The little Lolita looked askance at him and said, "I've never been nervous before. Do you know what's the big problem I discovered after breaking through to the Earthwheel level?" Rinpoche asked. "Not only Earthwheel experts but also Kismet Heaven experts." "What is it?" Tong Lan's attention was immediately attracted by his words. Even though she didn't give Rinpoche a good look, she was still very impressed by his knowledge. Even the Empress raised her head. "It's much stronger than a manwheel expert." Rinpoche suddenly jumped up, crossed more than 10 meters in one step, and kicked straight at Tong Lan's face. Tong Lan stretched out her palm to block, but Rinpoche did a somersault in midair. His other leg moved like a windmill and directly hooked Tong Lan's jaw. The back of Rinpoche's foot collided with Tong Lan's palm and produced a loud bang. Then Rinpoche was kicked away by Tong Lan. Rinpoche spun and landed at the side of the arena. He landed heavily on the ground, turned over and got up. His face was no longer as relaxed as before. He could sense Tong Lan's kick just now, but his body couldn't keep up with his brain's reaction speed. The last time he met the Imperial Guards on the way to the Imperial Kitchen on a rainy night, he felt the same way. The brain's reaction speed was much faster than the body's. His brain had already sensed it and knew how to dodge it, but he couldn't dodge it and his body couldn't keep up. This feeling always made him feel very uncomfortable, as if there was a delay in his brain's command of his body. This situation was very difficult to detect during normal training, but it was extremely obvious during sparring. The following sparring sessions also confirmed this point. There were many times when he could clearly sense her movements, but he just couldn't dodge it. After being hit by Tong Lan more than 10 times in a row, Rinpoche felt that his body was about to fall apart before stopping today's sparring session. "In any case, I've improved a lot." Rinpoche lay on the ground and panted. Tong Lan looked at him, raised her small face and said, "Improvement? You are thinking too much. It doesn't exist." Rinpoche immediately made up his mind to double tomorrow's homework. Listening to the background music coming from the side, Rinpoche sighed faintly. Sure enough, he had never won with his own background music. After Tong Lan left, Rinpoche described what he felt just now to the Empress. The Empress frowned and pondered for a long time before saying with some doubt, "Under normal circumstances, such a situation wouldn't occur. Instead, it was difficult for me to recover my strength for a month after burning my essence blood. That feeling was similar to what you described. Under normal circumstances, a person's physical body and spirit are equivalent. The level of the physical body corresponds to the level of the spirit. This is the case for every martial art. The situation that you described gave me the feeling that the spirit had surpassed the physical body. For example, when you were originally at the man-wheel level, your physical and spirit values were 5. After attaining the earth wheel level, one's physical and spiritual attributes would normally be 20. However, your physical and spirit values were 20, which is completely incompatible with your physical body. That's why such a situation occurred. It's like a 6-passenger car with 10 people in it. Take me for example. For example, my spirit value is 100, and my physical value is also 100. After burning my essence blood, my physical value drops to 30, but my spirit value is still 100. Under such circumstances, the body will not be able to be commanded according to my will. Rinpoche frowned. He could easily understand the Empress's explanation. To put it simply, it was like an Alto with a racing engine installed. A racing engine was naturally very good, but when installed in an Alto, it couldn't be utilized at all and would cause all kinds of problems. As for the reason, I guess it might be the influence of the Rui visualization that you practice. According to your description, this set of cultivation method will indeed have an impact on the divine soul when cultivating. Do you still remember the second volume of the ancient scroll of methods? After practicing Rui visualization, one can start practicing it after reaching the earth wheel level. If one hasn't practiced Rui visualization before, one can only practice it after reaching the spirit wheel level. I'm afraid this is the reason. After listening to the Empress, Rinpoche felt that this was most likely the case. After pondering for a while, Rinpoche suddenly thought of something. If the spirit greatly surpassed the physical body after practicing this martial art, then the way of fighting should be different from ordinary martial arts, right? There should be a special way to use the spirit, right? 10,000 techniques. 10,000 techniques. No wonder it's called 10,000 techniques. I'm afraid that the mystery lies here. In other words, he had to find a way to find the second volume in the future. Otherwise, wouldn't he become a level 60 spellcaster who hadn't learned any skills? Chapter 705. When Rinpoche returned to the palace from the academy, he happened to meet Shi Qing in front of the palace gate. In other words, Shi Qing was waiting for him. Congratulations, Sir Ren. Shi Qing's wrinkled face moved as he cupped his hands and smiled at Rinpoche. Where did the congratulations come from? Rinpoche rubbed his eyebrows. He had been busy recently and had been pondering about Rui visualization for a few days. The Empress had guessed that after practicing this technique, her soul would be far superior to others. In fact, her physical body wouldn't be weaker than others. The origin of this technique probably wasn't simple. Rinpoche had been pondering about this for the past few days. In addition, he was wondering where to find the third volume. The first volume was in the Hao Nation and the second volume was in Great Xia. What about the third volume? In fact, apart from Rinpoche, only spirit wheel experts could use this manual. This was because only spirit wheel experts had the strength of their souls. He should first find out the background of all the spirit wheel experts in the world, especially those with strange techniques. He might be able to find out something from them. Which spirit wheel expert was a nameless person? One could imagine how difficult it was to find out the background of all the spirit wheel experts in the world. In addition to this, there was another important reason. He had been having nightmares recently. Recently, he had been dreaming about the elderly version of Sister Feng several times and would wake up in a cold sweat. If this went on, he would wither before he could get married. There was a saying that what you think about in the day, you dream at night. However, he had been thinking about the ancient scroll of methods every day. Why did he keep dreaming about it? What kind of hatred did he have? Everyone minded their own business, so why couldn't you stay away from me? Recently, the entire court has been discussing Her Majesty's marriage. What are you worried about, Sir Ren? Could it be that you are dissatisfied? Shi Qing's face darkened when he saw Rinpoche's worried expression. Great Elder, you misunderstood. Rinpoche immediately reacted when he saw that Shi Qing was unhappy. All along, Tong Jinya and Shi Qing had been the friendliest to him in the court. However, Tong Jinya, that old man, relied on his strength and would slap Rinpoche to the ground from time to time as if he was smashing a mole. Looking at it this way, Shi Qing was the only good person in the entire court. Rinpoche didn't have much of a reaction even after tearing down his walls several times. No matter what, Rinpoche didn't want Shi Qing to misunderstand him on this matter. If others misunderstood that he was so worried about marrying the Empress, he was afraid that he would be stabbed to death behind his back. She frowned and hesitated for a moment before telling Shi Qing about her troubles in the past 2 days. She mainly talked about the nightmare. I see. Shi Qing stroked his beard and said, however, it is a great honor to be able to marry Her Majesty. There are millions of Aboriginal men, and which one of them isn't envious of you? How could a real man be a coward when it came to cultivation? Besides, it's the same in the dark. Rinpoche squinted at Shi Qing with a face full of hidden bitterness. Aren't your words quite down to earth? It was really easy to talk while standing up. I'll find you 6. Try turning on the lights. However, when he thought about it carefully, he really hadn't seen anyone that was too ugly in the Aboriginals. Actually, Aboriginal men weren't ugly. Rather, they were the valiant type, which suited the Aboriginals' aesthetic standards. As for Aboriginal women, they usually had strong and healthy bodies with excellent figures. Even if their looks were average, their wild nature had a unique flavor to it. As for ugly ones, he really hadn't seen one. This was probably the legendary talent of the race. Just like the legendary Yaksha, the men were extremely ugly, and the women were extremely beautiful. Although the Aboriginals hadn't reached this level, they had the same idea. Therefore, Shi Qing probably didn't quite understand what was ugly. Rinpoche should find a few photos for Shi Qing to stick on the wall and see if he could still be ambitious every night. Did Sir Shi congratulate me just now? Rinpoche immediately changed the topic and guessed. Shi Qing had been waiting for him here and congratulating him. He was afraid that the wedding date had been set. Although Rinpoche had been pondering about the ancient scroll of methods recently, he also knew that everyone in the imperial court was studying his marriage with the empress. Perhaps it was because the empress was about to get married that she was at a loss. Recently she often threw a little tantrum. Although he found it interesting most of the time, he would occasionally have a headache. After all, the empress wasn't an ordinary woman. An ordinary woman's small fists couldn't kill someone. Sir Rin, the wedding date between you and Her Majesty has been set. It will be on the 3rd of March next year, which is 9 months from now. After that, you will have to address her as a prince. Rinpoche understood that it was exactly as he had guessed. 9 months. It should be the time for the empress to go to the 60,000 mountains and for him to practice the yang-boosting solution. Thank you for informing me, Great Elder. Rinpoche took a deep breath and smiled. It's all right. I just want to tell you that Her Majesty is the Empress of Dayo and the Aboriginals. Don't let her be sad, Shi Qing warned. She is also my empress. Just like what you said before, millions of Aboriginal men are envious of me. How can I not appreciate my blessings? That's for the best. In fact, I don't have to be so worried. Anyway, you are no match for Her Majesty. Shi Qing laughed. However, I've been waiting for you not only to inform you about the wedding date, but also for another matter. Please speak, Great Elder. It's about the betrothal ceremony. We haven't been able to figure out what to do these few days and wanted to ask you if you have any ideas. After all, you are more knowledgeable and smarter, Shi Qing said. He then gave Rinpoche a brief explanation of the Aboriginals' betrothal ceremony. Rinpoche didn't know that the Aboriginals' betrothal ceremony was actually like this. They actually had to fight their way up. If a few big shots came to block the way, would he be able to exchange a few blows with each of them? Would he be able to enter the palace? He was afraid that the empress would have to visit his grave. Even if he could really enter the palace, there was still the big boss, the empress. If the empress was embarrassed, Rinpoche couldn't afford to get hurt. He immediately said seriously, actually, Her Majesty can marry me. I don't mind at all. When the time comes, you can just symbolically block Her Majesty. In any case, I definitely won't be able to beat her. How can this be? The Aboriginals have never had such a rule. Great Elder flatly rejected. Rules are set by people. If there is a first, there will be a second. Besides, who do you think I can beat? Rinpoche spread his hands. If you are capable, find a few people that I can beat. Then tie the empress up and wait for me to collect her. Shi Qing frowned and sighed. I feel that you have a lot of ideas and are full of nonsense, so I asked you what you think. However, it is against the rules to let Her Majesty marry you. If I have a child with Her Majesty, what will his surname be? Will it be Ren or Qi? Rinpoche asked. Of course it will be Qi. Regardless of whether it's a man or a woman, he will inherit the throne. Shi Qing answered without hesitation. It was just as Rinpoche had expected. No matter what, if he wanted to inherit the throne, his surname couldn't be Ren. Even he felt that this was the case. Of course he didn't care about this matter. After all, they would be his and the Empress's children. Of course they could also return to Earth with the surname Ren and Dayo with the surname Qi. Or they could have 2 more children and choose one with the surname Ren. However, Rinpoche was a little skeptical because, according to his observation, the fertility of the Aboriginals seemed to be very low, far lower than that of the people of Great Xia and the Yun Nation. For example, the commoners of Great Xia and the Yun Nation could have 5 or 6 children. After all, there wasn't much entertainment at night and they had nothing better to do. However, the Aboriginals generally only had 1 or 2 children and at most 3. However, another interesting point was that the experts of other countries didn't have many children either. For example, the experts of Tianjin Basin generally had very few children. Unless they married 17 or 18 concubines and worked hard, they might only have 8 or 10 children in a lifetime. This situation made Rinpoche speculate that the more powerful one was, the harder it was to have children. As a result, he wasn't sure how many children he and the Empress could produce. Chapter 706. Unknowingly, the Black Bamboo Academy had an additional ring of street lights. Electric lights were also hung on the beams of the classrooms and the library. The backyard of the Black Bamboo Academy was expanded again. In the distance, there was an additional courtyard that emitted black smoke all day long. In the courtyard was the most important and special equipment of the Black Bamboo Academy at present, the thermal power generator. Needless to say, the importance of energy was too great for science and technology. What was special was that after this thing was built, it would emit black smoke 24 hours a day, and a layer of dust would fall on the academy every day. Before this, there wasn't any dust on the ground. Fortunately, this thing was only used for testing and improvement. Rinpoche planned to build a power station outside the city to supply electricity to Lan City. At the very least, there would be electric lights. Rinpoche also had another plan, which was to place some LED screens on the streets of Lan City and play some teaching videos. He hoped to use this method to increase the literacy rate of the Aboriginals. At the very least, some ambitious people could learn through this method. When there were more literate people, there would be more readers for newspapers and books in the future. He still couldn't achieve universal education in Dayo, but he hoped to cultivate more talents through this method. The prerequisite for all of this was to have a stable power supply. He couldn't always rely on himself to bring solar panels and batteries from Earth, right? Energy was the foundation of modern society. This was a top priority for Rinpoche, and he had made a lot of preparations for this. Given the price of copper in this world, he was already prepared to use steel core aluminum wire. Then, a very serious problem appeared in front of him. There weren't any aluminum mines in Dayo. Rinpoche then took out the map and looked around. Finally, his gaze fell on the country on the east side of the map. Wealth, population, resources, salt, copper, iron, aluminum. They were all in his hands. It had to be said that sometimes having a good neighbor was indeed a very comforting thing. Rinpoche felt that his family had been busy preparing the vinegar, garlic, exquisite tableware, and napkins for the whole day. Then he waited for Zidonglai, who had gone to the neighbor's house to borrow crabs, to come back. Before that, he had more important things to do. Even if he followed the Empress to the 60,000 mountains, the place that only existed in other people's stories, it was unknown how vast it was. There were countless talents and treasures, as well as countless aboriginals and ferocious beasts fighting for survival space. It was a place where one could feel a wild aura just by hearing its name. The palace had been preparing for this trip for several days. After all, the journey this time was very long. Even if they rushed at full speed, it would still take more than 2 months to travel back and forth. If he wanted to enter the depths of the 60,000 mountains, it would take a longer time, so he definitely had to prepare more things. The guards accompanying him were winged cavalry warriors. It was said that this trip to the 60,000 mountains was to replenish the number of winged cavalry warriors. Now there were only slightly more than 600 winged cavalry warriors left, which was less than half of their original strength. Besides the Empress and Rinpoche, there were also Qing Yuan, Hong Luan, Lin Xiaola, and the people from the Imperial Kitchen. As for the students in the academy, most of them had to stay in the academy to complete the modification of the train and the thermal generator. Rinpoche decided to bring along the 5 students with the best results. Upon hearing this news, many students in the academy lamented. After all, the 60,000 mountains only existed in legends to them. They had never been there before, so it was very attractive to them. Furthermore, following Her Majesty to the 60,000 mountains to see the world was much more interesting than listening to the robots' lectures and experiments at the academy. They didn't expect that only 5 people would be able to go, and that it would be based on their exam results. Most of them knew that it had nothing to do with them. Perhaps only the few people with the best results would have a chance. The top student in the academy was a girl named Shiryu, followed by Shirgan, Su Jianshan, and Gulai. These people were all firmly in the top 5. After that, it was Su Peng, Tong Lan, and Xiongji who were fighting for the 5th place. The others didn't have much hope. Don't worry too much. The exam this time is very simple. There are a total of 10 questions, 5 of which are multiple choice questions and the other 5 are true or false questions. Everyone has a chance. Rinpoche smiled when he saw the students lamenting. Although he said this, most people still didn't have any confidence and could only resign themselves to fate. After class, Shiryu, Shirgan, and Su Jianshan were surrounded. Everyone's tone was full of envy and jealousy. You guys will definitely be able to go. Not only will you be able to see the world, but you will also be able to show your face in front of Her Majesty. Aren't you thinking too much? How can you show your face? You are just going to see the world. Shirgan chuckled. If there were more questions, it would be hard to say. However, there are only 10 questions, so everyone has a chance. If you are lucky, you can go. Su Jianshan was quite honest. That's easy for you to say. Everyone muttered. Where did they get so much luck? The next day, everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the exam papers. A group of people turned their heads and looked at Su Jianshan. You're so damn right. Even Su Jianshan was dumbfounded. Although everyone had a chance, that was only if they had similar results and didn't know one or two questions. They might be able to get it by luck. If one could only answer 1 or 2 out of 10 questions, then how much luck would one need to be able to answer them blindly? However, today's exam papers simply exceeded his imagination. It really depended on luck. 1. Among the people below, who is the blackest? 1. Lu Dehua. 2. Sun Honglei. 3. Guofuqing. 4. Osama. 2. What was it like today 1 year ago? 1. Cloudy. 2. Rainy. 3. Windy. 4. Cloudy, rainy, windy. 3. Luck is very important. 1. Choose me. 2. Choose me. 3. Choose me. 4. Choose me. Everyone was dumbfounded after reading the entire exam paper. This was different from what they had learned. Who were those 4 people? Who knew what the weather was like today 1 year ago? The third question was even more straightforward. Luck was very important. Even the answers were the same. They had to rely on luck. The rest of the questions weren't much different. After reading the entire paper, no one could remain calm. One by one, they raised their heads and looked at Rinpoche in a daze. Don't look at me. Answer the questions, he said. What are these? Everyone was dumbfounded. Use your wisdom and imagination. I believe in you. He laughed. Everyone looked helpless. They closed their eyes and finished answering the questions. It didn't take more than 10 minutes for them to hand in the exam papers. I know you are wondering why the exam papers are like this. It's completely different from what you have learned, he said after collecting all the exam papers. What I want to tell you is that luck is very important, just like what the third question said. Most of the time, people have no choice but to rely on luck. Therefore, in order to avoid falling into such a situation, you have to master as much as possible so that you don't fall into a situation where you have to rely on luck. In fact, 8 of the questions have real answers, and the answers are in the books in the library. As for the other 2 questions, it really depends on luck. Some people have to do the same experiment 10,000 times before getting the result. Some people get the result on the first try. It's undeniable that this is the role of luck. In addition, luck has many more functions, such as allowing you to survive in various situations. For example, it allows you to always discover the most important things. There are too many functions of luck. In fact, Rinpoche was trying it out this time. When he was pondering how to find the ancient scroll of methods for the past 2 days, he suddenly thought of the bichi he had seen on Mount Liotsue. After seeing it, many things happened and many people died. However, he was still safe and sound. He was convinced that although luck couldn't be seen or touched, it existed. Therefore, he wanted to see if he could pick out lucky people and see if they could encounter any opportunities in the 60,000 mountains. If it was useful, then he would really have to pick out a few lucky people to find the second volume of the ancient scroll of methods for himself. Rinpoche looked at the dumbfounded expressions of the students, smiled, and flipped through the papers in his hand. Then he stopped at a particular paper and the smile on his face gradually froze. All 10 questions were correct. Not a single one was wrong. And the name on the paper was Dulalio. Rinpoche pondered for a while and wondered if Dulalio's wife was a good husband. Chapter 707. July of the 72nd year of the Dayo calendar. The Empress's carriage left Lan City again. There were nearly 1,000 people and dozens of carriages. There wasn't much food, mainly spices, daily necessities and some other things. Rinpoche sat in front of the Empress's carriage with a bamboo pole in his hand. A water radish was hung at the tip of the pole, and he hung it 1 meter in front of Chi Shui the Kirin. Aren't you tired? The Empress asked angrily. Rinpoche had been teasing Chi Shui for 2 days. At first, it was meat, then it was fruit, and now, it was a water radish that the imperial kitchen chefs brought out from the palace. Chi Shui had such a gentle temper, but now it even raised its hooves when it walked. Rinpoche reckoned that it wasn't far from being kicked. I saw that it doesn't like meat, so I thought that it might like to eat vegetables. Rinpoche smiled and stuck the bamboo pole on the side of the carriage. The water radish continued to hang in front of Chi Shui. During this trip, the Empress finally got Chi Shui out of the lake after a year to satisfy Rinpoche's curiosity. Rinpoche felt that it should have gills. Otherwise, it wouldn't have stayed at the bottom of the lake for so long. Even whales had to come up to the surface to breathe. However, Chi Shui had been underwater for so long that it was about to grow hair. However, after careful observation, Rinpoche decided to go back and find a rock to press on Darwin's coffin. Rinpoche returned to the carriage and picked up the second volume of the ancient scroll of methods, to study. He had read it once when he first got it, but the first page exhausted his energy and almost fainted. After this breakthrough, it was much easier to read it again. Although it was still tiring, it was already within a controllable range. The second volume of the ancient scroll of methods recorded two parts: the nourishment technique and the spiritual cultivation technique. The nourishment technique could be practiced at the earth wheel level and focused on nourishing and strengthening the spirit. The spiritual cultivation technique could only be practiced after the spirit wheel level, so he couldn't see the specific content. The words in this ancient scroll seemed to have a magical power. If one wasn't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to read the contents at all. Even if they flipped to the end of the page, they would feel as if all their energy was sucked into it. Only when one's spirit reached a certain level could they break free from this situation. After reading the contents of the first volume of this book, he felt that it was as he had expected. This set of martial arts focused on the spirit. In other words, his future was very likely to be a mage. The premise was that he could find the second half of the ancient scroll of methods. As for this spiritual cultivation technique, it was based on the perception of the 5 elements when he was cultivating Rui visualization, to visualize the 5 elements and form a 5-element space. Then, through daily visualization, he would strengthen this space bit by bit, and at the same time strengthen his own soul. It sounded easy, like playing Minecraft. However, it was very difficult to actually do it. Over the past few days, Rinpoche had repeatedly visualized the giant tree with the wood element, the lake with the water element, and the earth with the earth element. However, every time he relaxed a little, the visualizations would collapse and dissipate. He was completely unable to achieve the solidified reality described in the ancient scroll. As a result, Rinpoche had no choice but to give up on his visualization. Every day he would carefully study and figure out the meaning of every word. The group walked for 7 days straight before stopping at a small city called Suyang City to rest and reorganize. The last time he broke through to the man-wheel level, the time it took for him to travel was reduced from 3 days to 2.5 to 5 days. This time, the time it took for him to break through to the earth wheel level had indeed changed. Now, the shortest time he could travel was 2 days and the longest was 7 days. This made it much easier to arrange his time than before. Rinpoche finally felt a little more free, and it was much easier to arrange his time. He didn't have to calculate the day of his return all the time, and he felt less pressured. Rinpoche returned to Earth with the Empress. The Empress went to download a television series while he made arrangements for some martial arts centers. Now that half a year had passed on Earth, the development of the 2 martial arts centers that were overseen by the winged cavalry warriors was much better than he had expected. Even without any advertisements, the small videos that some people secretly shot and circulated within a very small circle had caused an endless stream of people to sign up for the martial arts centers over the past few months. After more than half a year, the total number of disciples in the 2 martial arts centers had exceeded 400. Moreover, most of them were young people from well-to-do families. What surprised him even more was that someone actually contacted him through the martial arts centers and wanted to hire bodyguards. "Brother, look, it's him. I've confirmed it. He's the one who wants to hire bodyguards from our martial arts centers." As soon as Rinpoche returned to Earth, Rinwanyin came looking for him and showed him a web page on his phone. "They wanted to contact you directly, but unfortunately you weren't around," Rinwanyin said with some regret. However, he couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. Those who could hire bodyguards weren't ordinary people. However, the other party had a higher status and was a well-known tycoon in the country. Rinpoche usually only saw news about them on the news. Now the other party directly came looking for him. One had to know that their martial arts centers had been established for less than a year, and such a person had already come looking for them. How could this not make him excited? Rinpoche pondered for a while. This was also one of his goals for establishing a martial arts center. He originally thought that it would take a long time for the world to change for this trend to happen, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. It could be said that as long as Rinpoche nodded, he could establish a certain level of contact with the other party through this method. Furthermore, with this first person, the reputation of his martial arts center would easily spread to certain circles, and it would be much smoother to develop again. Although Rinpoche had always been very confident in the martial arts centers, this was the trend of the future. However, he didn't care about being more famous. If the bodyguards of the world's tycoons were all disciples from his martial arts center, the influence would be obvious. To put it bluntly, he, who controlled the advancement of those disciples, also indirectly controlled the information and lives of most of the tycoons. Unfortunately, this opportunity came too early. If it was a few years later, the martial arts center might really be able to cultivate a group of man-will experts. However, at present he could only use that group of mountain kids. Rinpoche reckoned that if he really sent the winged cavalry over, even though he would indeed establish a connection with them, this connection would probably be a deadly feud. Other than the Empress, only he could barely command them. If it were anyone else, they would be out of luck. Rinpoche believed in the ability of this group of troublemakers and believed that there was nothing they couldn't mess up. After considering for a full minute, he regretfully rejected the other party's request. It was still too early. "Brother, are you crazy? You actually rejected?" Ren Wanyan asked incredulously. "They naturally came looking for us because we are valuable. What kind of people are we? How strong are we? Don't you understand after such a long time? There will be opportunities for such things in the future, but not now." Rinpoche shook his head. This news was more of a surprise to him. What he was interested in now was how his small martial arts center entered the eyes of the other party. What Rinpoche didn't know was that even without this martial arts center, he had already entered the eyes of some people. After all, the incident with the Wang family had caused quite a stir in some circles. Some people had already noticed him after understanding some of the unknown things inside. Furthermore, although the people that the nation had gathered were secretive, many of them were martial artists from the outside world. Furthermore, they were martial artists with roots in sections. After a few years, it was inevitable that some information would leak out and be discovered by some people. They were indeed tycoons, and in the eyes of ordinary people, they were existences that needed to be looked up to. However, the Wang family, which inexplicably collapsed, had a high status and strength, but suddenly collapsed without any ability to fight back. In addition to the Qin family, there was also a very powerful faction in the country that inexplicably collapsed. This was inextricably linked to Rinpoche. When these two incidents were added together, it was more terrifying. Ordinary people couldn't detect it, but how could these people be simple? Many of them were omnipotent people, and it was inevitable that they would find out about some things through certain channels or clues. Subsequently, they found out about Rinpoche. It could be said that Rinpoche had long been marked in some people's hearts. He didn't need to think about how to build a relationship with others, but many people wanted to build a relationship with him. However, Rinpoche rarely appeared. Other than some contact with the Qin family, he only had contact with the nation. He had always lived in seclusion, and those people didn't have the opportunity to get in touch with him. Therefore, the martial arts center became the only channel for the outside world to contact him. This time it was also an attempt or perhaps a signal. After all, both parties weren't ordinary people, and it was impossible for them to come knocking on his door and say, "Bro, let's be friends. Let's go for a drink and get familiar with each other." Even if Rinpoche sent an ordinary disciple over, this would be considered a response. Unfortunately, Rinpoche didn't know about this and directly rejected the other party's signal. After knowing that he was rejected, the other party wasn't angry. Instead, he was even more certain of what he had learned. How could ordinary people reject them? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.